After hearing this, the faces of everyone present changed drastically. Especially Zhao Yunji, whose eyebrows were slightly furrowed, with a hint of anger and worry in his eyes. This matter started because of her Zhao family, or to be more precise, because of her Zhao Yunji. Now that the Zhou family is facing off against the Ma family, she is naturally involved. Now, even though the Zhao family has joined the Zhou family, which is also a foundation-building family, the Ma family still does not intend to give up, which is enough to show their determination to pursue this matter to the end. This is an extremely dangerous sign. Especially for the Zhao family. With the strong strength of the Zhou family, even if they face the Ma family, they may not suffer too much, but the Zhao family is different. Today's Zhao family is already weak. If it is attacked by the Ma family again, it is likely that it will be completely annihilated in this war. Zhou Daocheng and Zhou Daobai's faces were also extremely ugly. I originally thought that after the Zhou family came forward to protect the Zhao family, the Ma family would hold a grudge at most, but there was a high probability that it would be impossible to declare war directly. After all, 2 centuries-old foundation-building families were involved, and the impact of a direct declaration of war would be too great. Zhou Daocheng's eyes flashed with thought, and he asked tentatively, the Ma family has such a tough attitude. Are there other reasons? The second elder, Zhou Chengping, also had worries in his eyes. I don't know, these things in the family are all in charge of your uncle. I don't know how he thinks about it. As a family elder with a long-term vision, he does not want a war in the family, which will seriously affect the subsequent development. Many people are skeptical about the family head's decision, but over the years, the family head's decision has made the family prosperous and accumulated a lot of prestige, so most people still choose to believe it. The second elder let out a long sigh and then said, I am here to remind you that even if you are in Balin Lake, you must always be vigilant to avoid being attacked by thieves, especially Daocheng and Yunji. If the Ma family is cruel, they may attack you. After hearing this, the 2 people couldn't help but tense up and think a little more. Before the 2 of them could think about it, the second elder Zhou Chengping continued. Don't take it lightly, remember to keep this in mind. The store that Dodge is in charge of has been attacked by the Ma family before. Not only did the income drop, but also the weapon refining the transportation route of materials has also been targeted by the Ma family, and the losses have been considerable in recent days. What? Dodger was attacked. Zhou Daobai's expression changed drastically when he heard this, and there was obviously a hint of anger in his eyes. He clenched his fist tightly and slapped it on the table so hard that the tea spilled on the table due to the vibration. Don't be angry, second elder Zhou Chengping scolded, holding down Zhou Daobai and saying, the way of cultivation, remember to restrain your emotions. If you have this kind of mentality when encountering trivial things, how can you go forward in the future? Zhou Daobai took a few deep breaths, then calmed down his emotions, and said angrily, does the Ma family really want to go to war with us? How dare you be so arrogant? It's just a small confrontation. Don't be surprised. Second elder Zhou Chengping explained. It has not reached the level of killing or injuring others. Besides, there are family members here, so there is no chance that something will happen to Dao Qi, so there is no need to worry. Although he blamed Zhou Daobai for being impulsive, the second elder Zhou Chengping was still very moved. It must be a blessing for the family that the younger generations of the family can care about each other. It would be a real misfortune if Zhou Daobai and the others looked gloating and complacent after learning that their competitors had been attacked. Daobai, Daocheng, Yunji, the second grandfather is here to remind you not to be careless and be more careful on weekdays. If the Ma family really finds this place, the main thing is to protect their own safety, and they should always talk to you on weekdays. Family connections. Balin Lake is too far away from the family. The 3 of you must take care of each other to avoid accidents. The second elder Zhou Chengping talked a lot, and his concern was beyond words. And at the end, he took out 30 kilograms of spiritual rice from his storage bag and gave it to the 3 of them. Zhou Daocheng repeatedly declined, but the second elder had a tough attitude and failed to live up to his good intentions, so he finally had to accept it. These 30 kilograms of spiritual rice must have been purchased by the second elder with his own salary. It is of extraordinary significance to support the younger generations of the family out of his own pocket. After explaining this, the second elder Zhou Chengping rode away alone with the hunting team and began the hunting life for this year. The 3 of them, Zhou Daocheng, also kept the matter of Sha Ma's family in mind, and couldn't help but feel a little more gloomy in their hearts. Sixth brother, the people of the Ma family have ulterior motives and may be planning to do something secretly. The island you are on is far away, so you need to be more careful and contact us from time to time. Zhou Daobai looked over and said seriously. Zhou Daocheng nodded solemnly. Brother, don't worry, contact me often in the future and be more careful. The three of them exchanged a few words and returned to the island. Along the way, Zhou Daocheng felt a little heavier. It's just that it's not their turn to worry about the disaster the family is currently facing. The most important task now is to manage the White Scale Lake Station and avoid causing trouble to the family as much as possible. After returning to the island, Zhou Daocheng first cooked a bowl of spiritual rice, and ate a few pieces of first-class low-grade side dishes brought from his family to make up for the shortfall in his stomach. Then he went directly into the underground cave and started, Wutu Kunyu, the practice of Gong. In this cruel world of immortality, strength is the foundation of everything. Without strong cultivation, no matter how many ideas you have, you will not be able to implement them. As the Wutu Kunyu Gong operates, Zhou Daocheng's aura becomes stable, and the thick Wutu spiritual energy circulates around him, lingering with earthy yellow light spots. However, the comfortable training time did not last long. White Scale Lake, surrounded by the southern peak. A group of 6 people, with calm and restrained auras and downcast and fierce eyes, dressed in ill-fitting animal skin clothes, cautiously approached the White Scale Lake. Boss, this is it. A middle-aged man with a thin appearance and dark skin said in a low voice. The leader was tall and had a scar on his face that ran from top to bottom. He looked extremely fierce. He looked at the lake in front of him and felt the faint aura floating on the lake. He couldn't help laughing. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that this treasure hunting rat would actually be useful. It actually found a spiritual vein. If we occupy this lake, we will have a place to take root. The person behind him licked his smiling face and laughed with him. Hey, brother, my treasure hunting rat is still useful, right? Look, there seems to be an island in this lake. God is really helping us. Haha, you count the majority of the harvest this time. Come on, let's go over and have a look. In the underground cave, Zhou Daocheng took a breath and opened his eyes slightly in the dim light, looking deeply in a certain direction. Boom. There was a loud noise, sharp stones fell to the ground, and the dull sound echoed in the underground cave. Immediately afterwards, a shrill scream echoed. Fuck, there's a fucking trap. The 6th level Qi refining monk who was exploring the path ahead had just entered the underground cave and instantly triggered the falling rock formation. In an instant, in the narrow and airtight space, the falling rock formation exerted 120% of its power, and dozens of falling rocks fell from the sky. Even though the monk struggled to resist, his defense was directly broken, and he was seriously injured. The people behind him became alert for a moment and immediately took a few steps back. The scarred man at the head focused his eyes and said sternly, "You have been fooled. There is a formation here. Get out first." But when they turned back, they found that the way they came from had already been blocked by a stone wall. Not only behind him, mysterious lines appeared on the surrounding ground, and earth walls grew rapidly, surrounding them. Several people reacted quickly. Although they were not attacked, their formation was completely broken up. The 6 people were originally gathered together, but they were immediately separated by the earth wall. In a narrow and dark cave, they encountered accidents one after another, which suddenly changed the expressions of several people. In the secret place, a black shadow flashed across the formation, without being noticed by anyone. The scarred man at the head was also the most experienced. After the initial panic, he quickly calmed down and began to carefully examine the surrounding situation. However, the first time he felt the change in the formation, he realized that the situation was not good. His expression immediately changed, and he shouted loudly, "I wonder if your senior is an formation master." Zhou Daocheng heard the sound but did not react in any way. He still hid in the darkness and controlled the formation with all his heart. He currently has no idea of the other party's identity and purpose, so he naturally doesn't dare to take it lightly. There were thousands of thoughts in his mind. The second elder came here specially a few days ago and specifically asked a few people to pay attention to the Ma family's sneak attack. As a result, only a few days later, someone really sneaked in here secretly. Zhou Daocheng already had doubts about the identities of these people. Is it someone from the Ma family? The location of Balin Lake is hidden. Even most members of the family know that this station exists, but they don't know the specific location. How could the Ma family find it accurately? Could it be? Thousands of thoughts were tumbling in his mind, and Zhou Daocheng's face was extremely ugly. With just one face-to-face meeting, he could already see clearly that the strength and quantity of the people coming were stronger than he imagined. There were 6 people on the other side, and the strongest man, the leader, had reached the 8th level of chi refining. Among the remaining 5 people, 2 have reached the 7th level of chi refining, and 3 have reached the 6th level of chi refining. Such a fighting force, even within the family, is definitely not weak. It is completely enough to build a hunting team, and it is even easier to surround and kill a junior who is at the 7th level of chi refining. Moreover, no matter what the identity of the other party is, he has secretly invaded Balin Lake and entered the training place. He must be someone with evil intentions, and there is no reason to hold back. Under such circumstances, Zhou Daocheng was not interested in talking nonsense with them, he just wanted to get rid of them as soon as possible. After the scarred man asked, there was no sound in the entire cave and it fell into complete silence. After a few breaths, a weaker monk said carefully, "Boss, what is going on? Isn't the other party's identity simple?" The scarred man breathed heavily and said, "Senior can mobilize formations and has a very good command of formations. There is a high probability that he is an formation master. We may have hit an iron plate. Let's find a way to exit." Call out, stab. Before he finished speaking, a bright white sword flower flashed, illuminating the dark underground space and instantly hit a monk on the 6th level of chi refining. Suddenly a shrill scream echoed in the cave again. Zhou Daocheng understood that the other party was frightened by the formation and had not recovered for a while. He did not pay attention to the grade of the formation, so he was wary of him. But discovering that this is a low-grade formation of the 1st level may predict Zhou Daocheng's true strength. When the time comes to attack him, there will be no chance of winning. Taking advantage of this time, Zhou Dao took action decisively and took the lead in taking out the weaker ones. The advantages of the 3rd level high-grade skill, Wutu Kunyu Gong, are also clearly demonstrated at this time. Whether it is the quality of spiritual energy or the degree of solidification of mana, it is far from comparable to monks of the same level, let alone the weaker 6th level monks. In a secret sneak attack, he directly eliminated 2 people on the 6th level of chi refining with almost no effort. "Senior, we don't mean to offend, then leave here. I hope Senior's subordinates will stay." Then the next second, a 3rd scream sounded. The 3 people at the 6th level of chi refining all lost their ability to resist in a short period of time. "Humph, no offense intended. You have already entered my cultivation place, and you still dare to say you have no offense." Zhou Daocheng deliberately lowered his voice, making his tone low and mature to prevent the other party from discovering any flaws. But the moment he opened his mouth, Zhou Daocheng secretly thought something bad. "I originally wanted to comfort the leader by replying, so that he would be wary and not dare to take action easily, so that I could have time to deal with the other 2 7th level chi refiners." But when he spoke, his position was instantly revealed. The facts were not what he expected. When Zhou Daocheng was exposed for the first time, the scarred man's eyes suddenly lit up, a ferocious look flashed past, and he instantly looked towards the corner where Zhou Daocheng was hiding. "Hey, I finally found you." The cold voice echoed in the darkness, followed by a very fast knife, which directly split the stone wall in front. At the critical moment, Zhou Daocheng knew that he had no way to retreat, so he gritted his teeth and went forward instead of retreating. He used the mist array to cover his body and quickly chopped at the 7th level chi training monk with his sword. While avoiding the attack, he sought an opportunity to counterattack. After the attack failed, the scarred man no longer concealed his intention and said directly, "Don't be afraid, everyone. He is just a kid at the 7th level of chi training. His formation level is only the 1st level lower grade. Just take action to get rid of him. Damn, he is only at the 7th level of chi training, just like me." I was shocked. I thought he was a strong man at the 8th or 9th level of chi training. I was alert for so long in vain. The 2 7th level chi training monks immediately restrained their panic, their eyes were still dark, and they began to actively look for the figure of the listener. Zhou Daocheng felt cold sweat on his back. The other party took the initiative to lead him to talk just now, not only to lock his position, but also to detect his strength at the moment of fighting. What's more terrifying is that the other party had already started to cooperate tacitly as soon as they entered the cave and were attacked by the formation. First, they showed weakness to the enemy, then determined their position, tested their strength, and finally revealed their true nature. If Zhou Daocheng was strong, they would probably surrender. If Zhou Daocheng was average, they would definitely attack fiercely, just like now. Zhou Daocheng's face was gloomy, and he quickly hid in the darkness under the cover of the mist formation. Looking into the cave, the scarred man grinned and sneered, slashing without hesitation, breaking the earth wall formed by the earth defense formation. For a moment, the hard stone collapsed, the earth flew, and a lot of dust rose. However, seeing this scene, Zhou Daocheng did not panic, but a hidden sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. A few people did not notice that the gravel was scattered on the ground, and it was shaking slightly under the pull of the power of the formation. HMPH, with this little trick of yours, do you really think you can stop us? That's ridiculous. After cutting down the earth wall with one strike again, the remaining 3 people gathered together, and the narrow cave became a bit more spacious. The scarred man in the lead had a cold breath, and he took out a luminous stone, and the cave in front of him was illuminated. The ground is covered with a large amount of rubble, all of which are fragments of the Stonefall Formation and the Earth Control Formation. They have now been completely broken into pieces. Dust is floating in the air, and the fog accompanying the mist formation slightly blocks the view. But through the dust, the scarred man at the head still saw the spiritual spring in front of him at a glance. He was overjoyed and his breathing became a little faster. This is actually a second-level spiritual spring eye. Ha ha ha, we made a lot of money this time, we didn't expect to encounter such a good thing. Although the other people around him were more or less injured, the moment they saw Lin Kuan's eyes, they could not stop trembling with excitement. However, the scarred man at the head was not dazzled by joy. Instead, he was extremely calm and turned around to check the area shrouded in fog, looking for Zhou Daocheng. Compared to the previous caution, the scarred man was much bolder at this time. After a simple confrontation, he had already determined the enemy's strength. Although he is not weak, compared with the 6 of them, he is still far behind. Junior, do you think hiding in the fog will be useful? With a few first-order formations, do you really think you can be protected? Rather than actively attacking, the scarred man chose to test with words, showing an extremely cautious attitude. However, this is exactly what Zhou Daocheng wants to see, he needs time. Zhou Daocheng's eyes became sharp, and thick spiritual energy covered the cave, controlling the operation of the formation. After a long time, he spoke in a low voice. Through the formation, I have known your strength for a long time, but I did not take the initiative to escape. Don't you want to think about why? Hearing this, the scarred man's expression changed and he looked around cautiously, but did not find anything unusual. A 7th-level Qi refining cultivator behind him, after a little panic, found that there was nothing unusual. He couldn't help but became angry and said, "Boy, if you keep talking harshly when you are about to die, I will tear you alive in a moment." However, when he just finished speaking and was about to step forward, he felt his feet sink. His feet seemed to be rooted in the ground, and he stumbled and fell to the ground. What's the situation? What's going on with the dick? What's the problem? Sensing something unusual, they immediately looked at their feet. The next moment, the aura of the formation fluctuated instantly, causing the gravel on the ground to fly upwards. The attack from bottom to top directly hits the sensitive organs of their bodies. The severe pain overwhelms their reason and makes them wail in pain. But his legs were wrapped in gravel and he couldn't move at all. Under normal circumstances, as long as they exerted a little force, they could directly escape the control of the gravel on the ground, but under the severe pain, they had no time to react at all. It's now. Zhou Daocheng's eyes flashed with light. He kicked his legs fiercely, rushed out of the fog in the darkness, and struck the fatal position with each sword. In just one breath, the 2 7th-level Qi refining monks fell into a pool of blood, and the gurgling blood could not stop flowing out. There were Zhou Daocheng's sword wounds and injuries caused by flying rocks. They were bombarded indiscriminately in a short period of time, and few parts of his body were healthy. Only the scarred man, relying on the strength of the 8th level of Qi refining, could barely withstand the first wave of attacks, but he also suffered considerable injuries. However, without the help of others, he may not be stronger than Zhou Daocheng. At least, Zhou Daocheng could easily resist the attack from the scarred man with his thick Wutu spiritual energy, and he was already invincible. At this time, Zhou Daocheng's attack concept was very simple. Mainly focusing on defense, to ensure that you are not injured, and continue to use magic weapons and formations to attack. After his improvement of the falling rock formation, the gravel could fly up from the ground and attack the bottom wall at an extremely sinister angle, causing the scarred man who had never seen this kind of trick miserable. His trouser legs were stained with dripping blood, his thighs couldn't stop shaking, his eyes were filled with bloodshot eyes, and his steps kept faltering. When he tried to escape, he found that the hole had been blocked by a formation. Zhou Daocheng was wearing a turtle shell, and his attacks were not powerful, but they were continuous, not giving the scarred man any chance to breathe, and he continued to kill them. Even in the absence of formations, Zhou Daocheng relied on the third-level high-grade skills, and the quality and quantity of his magic power were completely worthy of the scarred man. What's more, now that the situation is changing, and with the assistance of formations, he already has an absolute advantage. In the first battle, Zhou Daocheng did not dare to rush forward. With the idea that no matter how careful he was, he continued to kill for an hour. It was not until he beat the scarred man until he was unconscious from blood loss that Zhou Daocheng stopped what he was doing. 10 minutes later, Zhou Daocheng rode a boat to the mountain forest near the south, found an area where monsters were infested, plundered the 3 corpses, and threw them into the beast's lair. Returning to the cave below, there are still 3 unconscious figures. They were tightly tied and thrown into a pool of blood. They had taken in too much air and outsourced too much. After some inspections, Zhou Daocheng found that among the 6 people, only 3 were completely dead. 2 were at the weak 6th level of Qi training, and 1 was at the 7th level of Qi training. They were completely not breathing, so he disposed of the bodies directly. As for the remaining 3 people, 1 is at the 8th level of Qi training, 1 is at the 7th level, and 1 is at the 6th level. Tie up the 3 people and put them into the formation. If there is any abnormality, they will be killed directly. What are these people? They don't look like people from the Ma family. Zhou Daocheng checked the storage bags of several people and found no clues to prove that they are from the Ma family. All the things added up. There are only 6 first-level magic tools of ordinary quality, more than 200 spirit stones, some first-level natural treasures and monster materials. The only 2 sets of martial arts books are completely different from the Ma family's martial arts. Could it be a hunting team hired by the Ma family? The characteristics shown by several people made Zhou Daocheng have new doubts. Although these people are not weak in strength and have rich combat experience, they should have fought with wild beasts frequently, but their combat skills and coordination abilities are very rough, and they don't seem to have received professional training. All kinds of signs indicate that they are most likely not from the family. On the contrary, the clothes and appearance of several people are very similar to those of casual cultivators. Zhou Daocheng's eyes flickered as he glanced at the 3 people. Then he snorted coldly and said, "Don't pretend to be dead if you wake up." The scarred man on the ground changed his expression. After a few seconds of pause, he opened his eyes and pulled his hands and feet. He found that he was controlled and sat down helplessly on the ground. "Did the Ma family send you here?" Zhou Daocheng asked with a cold voice, his eyes fixed on the scarred man's face, trying to guess from his reaction whether he was from the Ma family. But unexpectedly, the scarred man looked confused, raised his eyebrows, and said feebly, "Wah, what Ma family? Humph, I will let you go just because you act crazy and act stupid." The clear sound of the sword sounded, and the long sword weapon was unsheathed and pressed against the scarred man's jaw. With only an inch away, his throat could be slit. In the silent underground cave, one could almost hear the violent beating of the heart. The scarred man swallowed his saliva. Faced with the threat of life and death, he suppressed his fear and explained, "We are not from the Ma family, we are just from the nearby mountains and forests. I am a casual cultivator who accidentally discovered a treasure-hunting rat and found it here after searching for the spiritual energy fluctuations. However, I don't want to accidentally enter my friend's cave. I hope that my friends will be open-minded and let us brothers go." Rogue cultivator. Zhou Daocheng believed a little bit in his heart, but his eyes were still cold. "If you don't find it sooner, you won't find it later. Just after I occupied this place, you discovered it. How can you make me believe what you said?" As he spoke, the sword edge moved forward an inch, stabbing a bloody mark on his neck. The man with the scar was so angry that he didn't dare to say anything. His face was extremely frightened, and he was so frightened that he couldn't speak clearly. What I said is indeed true. We really don't know what the Ma family is." Seeing this situation, Zhou Daocheng had already considered. These people are most likely not from the Ma family, and they are probably casual cultivators who accidentally discovered this place. But regardless of their status, since this happened, there was absolutely no reason to let them go. While thinking about it, Zhou Daocheng's eyes became sharper, and the hand holding the sword became slightly stronger. Feeling the strong killing intent, the man with the scar also guessed it, and his desire to survive was strongly aroused, and he quickly exclaimed, Sir, please spare our lives. We have blind eyes, so let us just let it go." "Let you go." Zhou Daocheng's expression remained unchanged and he said calmly, breaking into my cave, destroying my formation, and intending to kill me. I have no reason to let you go. No, 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 my lord. We broke into the cave without permission. You will definitely not trust us to leave. However, I have a secret technique, which is a spiritual restraint technique. After you use it, Lord, we will naturally obey your orders. Don't worry about us. Leak. The scarred man also knew that there was no room for change in this matter, so he no longer took any chances and revealed his last trump card. Zhou Daocheng was also surprised and asked, the secret method of mental restraint. Do you have such a thing? Zhou Daocheng has also heard of the secret method of essence, but this kind of secret method cannot be obtained by monks in the qi refining stage. Divine consciousness and spirit can only be barely touched during the foundation building stage, but not much. Only those who are as powerful as Zifu will officially start to cultivate their spirit. This is an extremely precious and rare technique. Therefore, when the scarred man said that he had a secret method of mental restraint, Zhou Daocheng did have doubts. Seeing Zhou Daocheng's suspicious eyes, the scarred man seemed to see hope. He quickly struggled to get up from the ground and raised his buttocks to face Zhou Daocheng. Sir, there is a lining on the back of my pants, and there is a secret hidden inside. You can check it out for yourself. Zhou Daocheng's expression changed. Looking at the scarred man's unsightly posture, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. He couldn't bear to look at it. It happened that at this time, another monk at the 7th level of qi refining had also woken up. Zhou Daocheng kicked him unceremoniously. Go, take out the things. Compared to unlocking the restrictions of a strong person at the 8th level of qi training, Zhou Daocheng was more confident about practicing at the 7th level. Soon, a book made of special leather with only one page appeared in his hand. The tome was very old, with extremely worn edges. It looked like it had gone through a long period of time and was a secret method passed down from a long time ago. Even the name of the secret method has disappeared under the erosion of long years, leaving only the words, God, and, forbidden. Zhou Daocheng then directly called it, the forbidden secret method. After briefly checking the contents of the secret law, he realized that it was an extremely profound spiritual secret law, and it was also a special type of spiritual restriction. What is introduced in it is an extremely simple spiritual application method that can plant restrictions in the minds of other monks and thereby control life and death. Qi refining monks can use it. What an ingenious way to use it. Zhou Daocheng couldn't help but sigh. It was simply incredible that a qi refining monk with weak mental power and extremely low mental control could control such a mysterious magic. The scarred man took the initiative to explain. Sir, I found this in a cave. It should have been left by a certain senior. Is there anything else? Well, there are still some spiritual stones, but I have used them in practice, and only one secret method is left. If you don't believe me, you can search me. Zhou Daocheng gave him a disgusted look, and was still a little uncomfortable with the search. However, if this secret method was really effective, it could indeed save a few people's lives. After all, compared to killing all 3 people, leaving them to do things is obviously more cost-effective. The practice of the secret method is not difficult, and Zhou Daocheng has a very high level of understanding. He only needs to understand it a few times and he has already gained a glimpse of the secret method. It only took 2 hours to fully master this spiritual secret method that seemed simple but full of fantastic ideas. A weak ray of spirit was slowly peeled out of his mind, without having much impact on himself. The first experimental subject was a 6th level weapon refiner who was still in a coma. After waking him up, Zhou Daocheng took the initiative to release his mental barrier, and his mind was unimpeded and extremely smooth. However, in this person's mind, Zhou Daocheng found another similar mental power. It seems that the scarred man has used this secret method to control other people in the team, and the effect seems to be very good. Zhou Daocheng directly took action to erase the mental power left by the scarred man, and then planted his own mental power, and arranged complex restrictions according to the guidance of the secret method. When all this was done, Zhou Daocheng could clearly feel that he could control the life of this cultivator. With just a thought, he could completely activate the mental restriction, thereby completely depriving him of his life. This magical method made Zhou Daocheng marvel. He was even more amazed at the scarred man's luck. He could actually find this ancient secret technique in an ordinary cave. But he didn't know that the scarred man was even more shocked. Seeing that Zhou Daocheng had actually learned the secret technique in such a short time, he was so surprised that he couldn't recover for a long time. He clearly remembered that when he first obtained the secret method, he spent more than a year studying it and made countless mistakes before he could barely learn it. He didn't expect that the young man in front of him only spent a few hours to completely learn this complicated secret method and succeeded at once. The scarred man looked at Zhou Daocheng with a strange look in his eyes. With the experience of the first success, Zhou Daocheng was more handy and more proficient in the secret method. Using the same method, the spiritual imprint formed by the secret method was also left in the minds of the 7th level Qi refining cultivator and the scarred man, completely controlling the life and death of the two. In this way, Zhou Daocheng was relieved a lot. At least the 3 people in front of him were no longer threatening, and there was no need to kill them. They could be left to do things for him. One was at the 6th level of Qi refining, one was at the 7th level of Qi refining, and one was at the 8th level of Qi refining. They were definitely a strong force. It just so happens that the island needs some manpower, and now it's much more convenient. Zhou Daocheng glanced at the 3 people, untied them, and asked, "Tell me your identity honestly, why did you come here?" Now that he has completely controlled the few people, he doesn't have to worry about them lying. Zhou Daocheng must confirm their identities again. After the scarred man was untied, he breathed a sigh of relief. He ignored the dust on the ground and found a place to sit down. He said, "Sir, we really didn't lie. We are indeed casual cultivators nearby. My name is Meng Yushan, the kid in the 7th level of Qi training is Huang Zhou, and the one in the 6th level of Qi training is Zhang Yin." After the 3 people briefly introduced themselves, Zhou Daocheng also had a general understanding of their situation. At this point, they had no reason to lie anymore, and even if they lied, it would be impossible for them to fabricate their identities so perfectly. Zhou Daocheng also believed in his heart that this group of people was probably not from the Ma family. They were indeed casual cultivators in the nearby area, but they accidentally broke into Balin Lake. Rubbing his eyebrows, Zhou Daocheng felt a headache. He didn't expect that he would encounter such an unlucky thing. It was really bad luck. But fortunately, the final result was not bad. Not only did he gain a batch of resources, a book of spiritual secrets, but he also subdued 3 subordinates. But how to arrange these 3 people made Zhou Daocheng feel troubled. "Meng Yushan, where did you live before? Do you have your own station?" Meng Yushan shook his head. "These days, all the well-known spiritual veins are occupied by major forces, where is our share? Besides, if there are really spiritual veins, we won't have to hunt monsters for a living." Zhou Daocheng nodded when he heard this. The situation was similar to what he thought. "Well, then the 3 of you stay." Hearing this, Meng Yushan and the other 2 did not react much. When they were controlled by the spiritual secrets, they were already mentally prepared. Meng Yushan asked cautiously, "Sir, may I ask if you have left us here, is there anything for us to do?" Zhou Daocheng pondered for a while and said lightly, "Actually, there is nothing big. On weekdays, we are responsible for taking care of the spiritual fields and the spiritual plants in the spiritual fields, and applying rain and fertilizer on time." After finishing, Zhou Daocheng seemed to think of something. He glanced at the 3 people and continued to add, "In addition, supervise the situation around the island to prevent people with bad intentions from approaching." The 3 people looked embarrassed. People with bad intentions, they were referring to them. "Don't worry, sir, we will take care of this little thing." Meng Yushan quickly accepted his new identity and asked tentatively, "Then the 3 of us live on the island?" "Well, you go back to the island and repair a few houses by yourself. If there is anything, notify me through the communication stone." With these 3 people, life is indeed much more convenient. At least the spiritual fields do not need to be managed personally in the future. Just leave it to these 3 people. The crystal jade rice is a relatively easy to grow spiritual plant. It does not require too many planting skills. Even if the 3 people do not know the skills of spiritual plants, they can manage it easily. Moreover, with the 3 people, the island's defense capabilities have been improved to a higher level, and there should be no more attacks on the door in the future. 5 days later, in the quiet underground cave, the communication stone emitted a flickering light. Zhou Daocheng frowned slightly, slowly gathered the Wu Earth spiritual energy around him, and his aura became stronger, like a heavy hill. Looking at the communication stone, it was a message from Meng Yushan. "My lord, there is a woman outside the island. She said she came to find you. Do you want to let her up?" Zhou Daocheng slapped his head and immediately knew what was going on. He secretly said that he was careless and forgot to tell the 3 of them about Zhao Yunji and Zhou Daobai's situation. As a result, Zhao Yunji was now blocked outside. When he rushed to the edge of the island, Meng Yushan and the other 2 were looking at Zhao Yunji vigilantly. Zhao Yunji's eyes were solemn, the sharp blade in her hand had been unsheathed, and her eyebrows were as cold as ice, as if she was going to fight if she disagreed. When she saw Zhou Daocheng's figure, the coldness between her eyebrows and eyes dissipated a little. Sir, sir. Zhou Daocheng glanced at the three people and directly ordered them to move aside, making way for Zhao Yunji. Zhou Daocheng, where did you find these three people? Their strength seems to be not simple. Zhao Yunji hesitated for a while, but still asked with doubts. As both were in the late stage of qi refining, Zhao Yunji could see through the strength of Huangzhou and Zhang Yin at a glance, and was naturally shocked. Meng Yushan was at the 8th level of qi refining, which she could not see through. There was only a vague outline, so she was even more shocked. She almost thought that Zhou Daocheng had died. Zhou Daocheng explained casually. Friend, help me look at the island. Why did you come over suddenly? What happened? Seeing that Zhou Daocheng didn't want to say more, Zhao Yunji didn't ask any more questions. He just took a meaningful look and then slowly said. You should know that I am raising the velvet silkworms of my Zhao family. During the breeding, I need to feed a special spiritual plant called white mulberry. I don't have it in my hand. I need to search for it in the nearby mountains and forests. If I want to find it, you go together. Is it difficult to find? Or is it dangerous? Zhou Daocheng asked. It's not difficult to find, but it's a bit far away. To say it's dangerous isn't bad, Zhao Yunji said softly. This call made Zhou Daocheng a little confused. It was not difficult to find and there was no danger. Why should he go with him? Is it possible to actually fall in love? Zhou Daocheng glanced at Zhao Yunji, then touched his beard, secretly thinking that although he was indeed good-looking, only 2 ups and downs had completely made Zhao Yunji want to stop. Seeing Zhou Daocheng's strange look, Zhao Yunji reacted immediately and scolded him coldly and angrily, don't think nonsense. It's okay, I understand. You don't understand. Zhao Yunji couldn't help but rolled his eyes and began to explain. Of course, she didn't roll her eyes shyly, but rather supported her forehead helplessly. After calming down, Zhao Yunji glanced at Meng Yushan and the other 2 behind her. Zhou Daocheng immediately reacted and waved to the 3 people, signaling them to leave. After seeing them leave, Zhao Yunji regained her composure and said, I have been thinking about it for a long time these days. The head of the Zhou family asked me to participate in the competition. It's not that the better I perform, the more favor I will get. On the contrary, it may be disadvantageous rather than beneficial. Zhou Daocheng lowered his eyes, and a trace of thought flashed across his eyebrows. Then what do you think the head of the family means? Zhao Yunji pondered for a while and said, after all, I am not a member of the Zhou family. If I show my ability, it will only disgust the Zhou family. What they really want to see is just me assisting you. After speaking, Zhao Yunji looked at the clear lake, not knowing what she was thinking. Zhou Daocheng glanced at her and was a little surprised. He didn't expect her to think so deeply. Perhaps for people from small families, they have to bear more pressure since childhood, and face the challenge of the survival of the family, so they naturally have more thoughts. After a while, Zhao Yunji said, your island is too barren, and the number and quality of spiritual fields are not high. It is difficult to meet the basic requirement of 1,300 pieces throughout the year. So, I want you to participate in the breeding of flower silkworms. You don't need to really help. I will allocate some spiritual stones to you on the grounds of cooperation. Zhou Daocheng raised his eyebrows and said in surprise, you don't need my help, and then you give me spiritual stones. Yes, you don't need me to take out spiritual stones. Yes, free food. Yes, then can you use the flower silk and make me a few sets of inner armor? Zhao Yunji's forehead veins jumped, and he felt a tightness in his chest. After a long silence, his cheeks flushed, because he was angry. It is not easy to breed flower silkworms. The silk produced each year is not much, and it needs to go through complex processing. In the end, even fewer magic tools can be made. It is precisely because of its scarcity that it is in short supply. Zhao Yunji glanced at the young man in the past and sighed helplessly. How can this be married? This mother is simply here to be a mother and take care of the child. Okay, I'll leave you a set. Zhou Daocheng blinked. He didn't expect that Zhao Yunji had such a good temper and could agree to this. So he raised his eyebrows and said, then I have been practicing sluggishly recently. I have 2 or 3 difficult problems that I can't figure out. Can I visit you tonight? However, before he finished speaking, Zhao Yunji glared at him directly, turned around and left with a wave of her sleeves. She stood on the boat in a green dress, leaving only a clear voice without any emotion. I will go to find Bai Senkui tomorrow, and you can come to my island to find me tomorrow morning. Zhou Daocheng touched his nose, looked at the figure leaving, and secretly felt lucky in his heart. Exposing Meng Yushin and the other two this time was already a careless act. Fortunately, Zhao Yunji did not ask about it, otherwise it would be difficult to explain. If she went deeper into the island, she would have to expose the 8 acres of first-level middle-grade spiritual field. Fortunately, she was thick-skinned and drove Zhao Yunji away, otherwise it would be difficult to get away with it. However, thinking of what Zhao Yunji said, Zhou Daocheng smiled helplessly, and did not reject her idea. Although he did not want to compete for the so-called quota, nor did he want to be exposed too much, he just wanted to stay on the island and practice peacefully, but Zhao Yunji would not think so. She still had a family behind her, and her own uncertain immortal path, so she naturally needed to consider more. If the road goes smoothly in the future, I can help a little. It's not good to eat and drink for free. Zhou Daocheng was thinking. Meng Yushin and the other two came over and winked at him. Glancing at the 3 people, Zhou Daocheng waved his hand. Meng Yushin and the other two came trotting over, grinning and asking, Sir, was that my sister-in-law? Zhou Daocheng looked a little strange. You are so old, how can you call her sister-in-law? Meng Yushin was stunned, pulled the scar on his face, and asked tentatively, Then, call me sister-in-law. I call you brother. That's fine. Ah no no no. Meng Yushin hurriedly shook his hand and said with a sad face, Then I call the lady. Zhou Daocheng waved his hand and didn't continue to dwell on this issue, but asked, Do you know a spiritual plant like white mulberry sunflower? White mulberry sunflower. Meng Yushin thought for a moment and replied, It should be a first-level middle-grade spiritual plant. There should be none in the nearby area, but it should exist in the unknown mountains farther away. Are there any monsters entrenched near this spiritual plant? The problem Zhou Daocheng was most worried about was encountering powerful monsters. There are few people around Balin Lake, which is close to the Great East Wilderness. There are many powerful monsters living there. Even the hunting teams of various families need to be very careful. Even if there are 9-level Qi refining leaders, there will often be casualties. If 2 juniors with 70% Qi refining rush in, the risk factor is very high. At this time, Huang Zhou suddenly said, Sir, white mulberry is not a particularly precious spiritual plant, and it will not attract monsters when it grows on its own. However, silkworms often appear around white mulberry, so it will attract some other monsters to prey on it, which may be dangerous. Zhou Daocheng nodded slightly and memorized this information in his mind. Where is the location? Is it far away? It's about 50 kilometers away. If everything goes well, we can get there in half a day. Meng Yushin replied. Then he thought about it and added, Sir, we can go together tomorrow. We are casual cultivators in this area and are familiar with the nearby environment. Although this area is not too dangerous, there are still many complexities. Case. Especially since you two are both descendants of the family. You are well dressed and not very strong. You are likely to attract the covetous attention of other casual cultivators. We can handle it even if we are here. After listening to Meng Yushin's words, Zhou Daocheng's calm eyes suddenly showed a look of thought, and asked, Are there many other casual cultivators in this area nearby? Meng Yushin did not doubt that he was there, and replied, That's natural. This is the easternmost point of the Nanhang Immortal Realm. Going further east, there lies the huge eastern wilderness. There are a lot of unexplored virgin lands, and there are many unexplored virgin lands. A heaven of cultivation. Although the area we are in is still on the edge of the eastern Great Wilderness, there are also many weaker casual cultivators making a living here. Zhou Daocheng nodded silently and didn't say anything more, but he just had some more thoughts in his mind. With the spiritual mysticism, you have the means to control the monks. Is it possible to control a group of casual cultivators using a method similar to the one used to control the 3 men in Meng Yushin? After all, as Meng Yushin said, there are many casual cultivators around here. Since the first batch of casual cultivators can discover Balin Lake, then there may be a second batch, a third batch. If there is no strong strength, it must be very danger. And now, the family needs to spend most of its energy dealing with the Ma family. It is unable to provide help from Balin Lake and must rely on its own efforts. Predicting possible disasters is also a very necessary thing, or in other words, it is something that has to be considered in the next period of time. Burying his thoughts deeply in his heart, Zhou Daocheng already had some plans. After a moment of silence, he looked at Meng Yushin and said, "The three of you will go with me tomorrow, just to take a look at the nearby environment." The next day, early morning. A light mist enveloped the lake, and from time to time there were traces of white-scaled bass swimming by, causing light ripples on the water. Zhou Daocheng took Meng Yushin and three others by boat to Zhao Yunji's island. Meng Yushin whispered, "Sir, if you don't look carefully, your island is really not as good as this one. Zhao Yunji's island has a larger area, flatter terrain, and richer aura on the surface, and its environment is better than Zhou Daocheng's island in all aspects." Zhou Daocheng just smiled. If he hadn't accidentally discovered the spiritual spring eye, the environment on his island would indeed be average. As for why he chose that one, it was just for the sake of purity. As long as the location was concealed enough, even without the spiritual spring eye, he could still rise with the help of formations and techniques. But with the Lingquan eye, everything becomes easier. When he arrived near the island, Zhao Yunji was already ready. He changed out of his elegant Xingyi and wore a black outfit underneath and a loose robe outside. As expected, Zhao Yunji is several years older and has much more experience in traveling than Zhou Daocheng. The costume is for convenience in traveling and fighting, but it is also a magic weapon with certain defensive capabilities, while the robe is to cover up the graceful body and avoid unnecessary trouble due to figure and appearance. Zhao Yunji put his luggage on his back and boarded the boat with his magic weapon, saying, "Let's go." Zhou Daocheng glanced at the bulging luggage behind him and asked, "What did you bring with you?" "It's such a big package." Zhao Yunji straightened his hair and said softly, "Some daily necessities, as well as elixirs, talismans and the like. You should rarely go out. These things are necessary." "Then why don't you put it in the storage bag?" Zhao Yunji was about to say, "Which junior can afford a storage bag?" In the blink of an eye, Zhou Daocheng saw two storage bags hanging on his waist, which looked like they contained a lot of things. One storage bag was given by grandfather Zhou Chengyuan, and the other was snatched from Meng Yushin. Although Zhou Daocheng has no experience, Meng Yushin has rich experience, so he has to bring all the items he needs to carry, and even prepares more things. The only thing missing was elixirs, talismans and the like. Due to the lack of money, they didn't buy them for the time being, but fortunately, Meng Yushin and the other three had some, which they could barely spare. Zhao Yunji pursed his lips, took off his luggage, and threw it into Zhou Daocheng's hands. "Just put it together. Remember not to show your wealth when you are outside, so as not to be targeted by the group of casual cultivators and cause trouble." Meng Yushin touched his nose and didn't dare to say anything. After all, they were just those casual cultivators. According to the information Zhao Yunji learned, Bai Senkui is in the northeast of Balan Lake, which is similar to the location mentioned by Meng Yushin. Zhou Daocheng didn't say much, and the four of them went straight on the road. Most of the mountains here are in undeveloped areas, and the terrain is wild and dangerous. Because there are few families and forces nearby, the surrounding monsters are rarely cleared away, so traces of being touched can be seen everywhere. Using the magic weapon to open a path, within just a few kilometers, I encountered a demonic beast that was in the middle stage of chi refining. However, facing a few people, I naturally couldn't get any benefits. As long as the weaker Huang Zhou takes action, the problem can be easily solved. At this time, Zhao Yunji also had a deeper understanding of the strength of Meng Yushin's three people, one each at the 6th, 7th and 8th levels of chi refining. Although this strength is not very strong for ordinary forces, it is definitely not weak, and it can already sustain some small scenes. Zhao Yunji asked in a low voice, "Who are they?" "They don't look like members of the Zhou family, but rather like casual cultivators." Zhou Daocheng did not hide anything and said directly, "It is indeed a casual cultivator nearby who accidentally met me. He was impressed by my strength and charm and chose to submit to the Zhou family." Zhao Yunji didn't pay attention to the joke, but took a deep look at Zhou Daocheng. But suddenly she felt that there seemed to be some mystery surrounding the young man in front of her, which she could not see through. She couldn't help but recall that when the Zhao family was discussing who to marry her to, they had taken stock of the children within the Zhou family. However, the main discussion at that time was with members of the Zhou family's generation. After all, no one expected that the head of the Zhou family would let her marry a junior from the Taoist generation. However, the situation of the Zhou Jiadao generation was also discussed during the process. Among the Dao generation, there are currently only 13 of them. The only ones who can be considered talented are the eldest Zhou Daobai, Lao Sisi Daoqi, and Lao Lu Zhou Daocheng. It's just that among the three, Zhou Daocheng's cultivation level is not as good as Zhou Daobai's, and his cultivation skills are not as good as Zhou Daoqi's, so he ranks last among the three. I just didn't expect that in the end, the head of the Zhou family, Zhou Chengyi, would defy all opinions and select Zhou Daocheng as the marriage partner. Zhao Yunji vaguely seemed to have noticed something strange about Zhou Daocheng. But if Zhou Daocheng knew what she was thinking, he would only reply, "You are thinking too much." It is precisely because Zhou Daocheng has no advantages that even if he marries Zhao Yunji, it will not have much impact on the Zhou family, so this arrangement is made. The group did not move very fast, and it took most of the day to finally arrive near the destination. The mountains and jungles here are very dense, the terrain has become particularly steep, and the probability of monsters appearing is gradually increasing. Fortunately, Meng Yushin and the other two are experienced, and they have avoided many dangers along the way, and they also have unique methods to deal with many monsters. Otherwise, Zhou Daocheng and Zhao Yunji should have taken a lot of detours. It should be nearby. I have seen Bai Senkui before, but it may be a bit troublesome to look for it now. Huang Zhou wiped the sweat from his forehead and spit casually, showing his bandit spirit. Returning to this mountain range is the world where they, a group of casual cultivators, can truly adapt to, and their aura has changed a lot. Zhou Daocheng has been constantly adapting to the wild environment for half a day, and has learned a lot from Meng Yushin and the other two. Zhao Yunji climbed up a boulder and scanned the surrounding terrain, looking for areas where white mulberry may be found. As the Zhao family's unique secret recipe, Zhao Yunji is also a genius of the Zhao family. He has received a good education since childhood and knows all this knowledge. Soon, the target was found. That area is flat and dry, facing the sun, and the soil nearby is also suitable for the growth of white mulberry. Let's go and take a look. Just as Zhao Yunji was about to stand up, he was stopped by Meng Yushin, who was standing beside him, and even pulled him back. Not only Meng Yushin, but also Huang Zhou and Zhang Yin on the side were looking sharply ahead. Zhou Daocheng noticed something unusual about them and asked, "Did something happen?" Meng Yushin swallowed his saliva and said with a trembling voice, "Look, do you see the entrance of the cave in front? That is the cave of the second-level monster, the spirit-devouring ant colony." Hearing this, Zhou Daocheng's pupils shrank instantly, and the information about the spirit-devouring ant colony emerged in his mind. This is a second-level spirit insect monster that is not strong individually, but usually appears in groups. Even ordinary foundation building experts can't. Don't dare to provoke easily. This special ant colony has an almost terrifying greed for any spiritual material, and will eat everything up if it comes into contact with it. Especially items with high spiritual energy concentration such as monk bodies, magic weapons, elixirs, and talismans. Relying on the huge numbers, through the terrifying insect sea tactics, carrying out continuous attacks, devouring and gnawing the flesh and mana, dozens of foundation building experts may be hunted by the ant colony. If you were targeted by a powerful second-level monster, you might still be able to escape. But if you are targeted by a swarm of spirit-devouring ants, you will definitely be chewed up to the point where no bones are left. If you encounter this kind of monster in the wild and attract the attention of the ant colony, there is almost no possibility of escape. Zhou Daocheng suddenly understood that no wonder the three Meng Yushin were so nervous, because if they were not careful, all 5 people present might be killed here, and no one would be spared. Thinking of this, the breathing of the 5 people present became rapid. Meng Yushin swallowed and lowered his voice. "We can't stay here any longer. Let's retreat slowly. We must not attract the attention of the ants." The others nodded silently and squatted down quietly, making as little noise as possible. Fortunately, everyone has not completely entered the living range of the spirit-devouring ant colony. They are currently several hundred meters apart. As long as they are careful, it is still possible to stay away from this area. If you get any closer, it will be really dangerous. It took a few breaths to get here, but it took a full 2/4 of an hour to get back. It wasn't until he was 2 or 3 kilometers away that Zhou Daocheng breathed a long sigh of relief and felt that his breathing was much easier. Meng Yushin and the other 3 fell to the ground with a pop sound. "Grandma, I'm so stupid. I've really seen a ghost. How could there be such a ghost thing? It's really unlucky." Huang Zhou leaned on the tree stump, cursed and said, "Who said it wasn't true? I almost died here. We wander around this area every day. How come we didn't know there was a colony of spirit-devouring ants there?" Zhou Daocheng and Zhao Yunji were not much better. They took out 2 or 3 water bags from their storage bags, threw one to Meng Yushin and the others, gave one to Zhao Yunji, and kept one for themselves. Then they raised their heads and drank 2 mouthfuls. Stop complaining. Just have fun wandering around a group of spiritual insects like this and come out intact. Apart from the initial fear, Zhou Daocheng's mood recovered and he became much calmer. Meng Yushan regained his senses and analyzed carefully. We often hunt wild beasts in this area, but we have never seen a colony of spirit-devouring ants, nor have we heard of the existence of such monsters. The group of spirit-devouring ants we just met, it is most likely a new one, and I think the hole I have learned is not very big, and the soil is pale white, so it is very likely that it is just an ant colony in the qi refining period. A first-level spirit-devouring ant colony. That's not something we can deal with. Zhao Yunji frowned. However, there was a hint of greed in Huang Zhou's eyes. I heard that although the spirit-devouring ant colony is terrifying, it is also an extremely precious spiritual insect. There are many treasures of heaven and earth in the nest. Snapped. Meng Yushan slapped Huang Zhou on the head fiercely and cursed angrily. How dare you even think about this thing? Are you too tired of living? Oh, treasures from heaven and earth. Zhou Daocheng's eyes lit up. He looked over curiously, and asked, "It's okay, let's talk about it." Huang Zhou rubbed his head, and after hearing Zhou Daocheng's speech, he said with relief, "The spirit-swallowing ants swallow the pure spiritual energy, so they will secrete a kind of spiritual nectar, which has extremely pure and rich spiritual energy. After absorbing it, it can quickly increase its strength, and it has a certain effect in recovering injuries. Besides, this is not the most precious thing." Huang Zuiyu said more enthusiastically, lowering his voice. "I heard that some powerful monks can tame this kind of spirit worm for their own use as a means of combat, so the eggs of swallowing spirit ants are also extremely precious." This was the first time Zhou Daocheng heard about it, and he was shocked. Domestication spirit. A method of controlling beasts. Seeing Zhou Daocheng's interest, Meng Yushan also explained. Indeed, the Bailingman, a force in the Purple Mansion, is famous for its beast control methods, which are similar methods, but we should not think about it. This thing is too dangerous, even if only the strength in the qi refining stage is not something we can touch. Zhou Daocheng nodded. Meng Yushan and others were more experienced in this regard. Logically speaking, casual cultivators are the most greedy group of people. No matter whether there is danger or not, as long as there are cultivation resources, there will be casual cultivators. If even casual cultivators dare not touch it, it is enough to illustrate the danger of this matter. Several people once again turned their goals back to looking for Bai Sankui. In the nearby area, white mulberry is not a particularly precious and rare spiritual plant. Although it takes some effort to find it, it is not particularly troublesome. After taking some long detours, Meng Yushan relied on his own experience to find some white mulberry trees. Although the number was not large, it could be transplanted, which would solve Zhao Yunji's urgent need. After doing all this, it was almost evening. Zhao Yunji looked at the sky and said with some worry, "It may be too late to rush back to Bailin Lake today, and we may have to live in the wild." Zhou Daocheng looked around and finally looked at Meng Yushan. Meng Yushan was also sensible. He knew that it was his turn to take action again. He was happy to be able to show his value in front of Zhou Daocheng. "Sir, when we were casual cultivators before, we often lived in the wild, but the environment was relatively bad. I hope you two can endure it as much as possible." Zhou Daocheng waved his hand. "It doesn't matter, as long as you have a place to live." Neither he nor Zhao Yunji were spoiled, so they naturally didn't care too much about these. Meng Yushan took advantage of the sky before it was completely dark, found a hidden cave, and easily killed the blue wolf monster in it, and then occupied it. The three cooperated tacitly and had a clear division of labor. Huang Zhou skillfully handled the blue wolf corpse to avoid attracting the attention of other monsters. Zhang Yin found some special spiritual herbs nearby to get rid of the fishy smell in the cave, making it easier to live there at night. Meng Yushan went into the cave to investigate, to determine if there were any other dangers, and to check if there were any natural treasures in the cave. Surprisingly, Meng Yushan soon found 2 earth spirit grasses deep in the cave and gave them to Zhou Daocheng. The soil essence grass is the spiritual plant that Zhou Daocheng planned to buy seeds before, but gave up because of insufficient spiritual stones. This kind of spiritual plant is of great benefit to the cultivation of earth attribute monks. It can release pure earth attribute spiritual energy, which is exactly what Zhou Daocheng needs, so he naturally accepts it without hesitation. That night, Zhou Daocheng and the other 5 rested in the cave. However, it's more accurate to say that it was just a one-night stay, rather than a night's sleep. The 3 of Meng Yushan were guarding outside, watching the bonfire in the valley and being wary of the monsters around them. There was an accident last time. Zhou Daocheng and Zhao Yunji in the cave were also unable to rest peacefully. They were also always vigilant and finally practiced all night. The next day, as soon as the sky got slightly brighter, Zhou Daocheng and the others immediately set off and spent most of the day returning to Balin Lake. It was almost noon before we returned successfully. During this trip, Zhao Yunji collected some white mulberry flowers to facilitate silkworm rearing in the future. Zhou Daocheng obtained 2 first-grade high-grade soil essence grasses and some monster materials. The harvest was not much. In addition, an extremely dangerous colony of spirit-devouring ants was discovered, which Zhou Daocheng kept in mind. After returning to the island, Zhou Daocheng suddenly had an idea in his mind. During this trip, the 3 Meng Yushin showed extremely rich experience, especially their abilities in hunting monsters and surviving in the wild. When they were in the wild environment, they showed a completely different state from usual. Since they have this ability, it is indeed a waste to keep them on the island. Zhou Daocheng thought in his mind, there is not much work on the island. At most, it is watering and fertilizing, and by the way, beware of monks with evil intentions approaching. Zhou Daocheng can do things like watering and fertilizing by himself, and he even knows more than Meng Yushin and the other 3. As for being wary of foreign monks, you can actually do this even if you don't stay on the island. You just need to have 3 people stationed outside Balin Lake. On weekdays, I hunt wild beasts in this area to earn spiritual stones, and at the same time, I also prevent others from approaching here. With this in mind, Zhou Daocheng called Meng Yushin and the others over. After 2 days and 1 night of getting along, the 2 parties have become quite familiar with each other, and the relationship is not as rigid as it was at first. Sir, do you have anything to do? Meng Yushin said respectfully. Zhou Daocheng said calmly, Old Meng, how about I find a new place for you outside Balin Lake? You usually make a living by hunting monsters as before, and help me monitor the surrounding situation. I originally thought that if the 3 of them had the opportunity to escape from their own control, they would happily agree. But unexpectedly, the 3 Meng Yushin looked at each other with embarrassed expressions. Zhou Daocheng frowned and said, Is there any problem? Do you want to stay here? Meng Yushin scratched his head. Said, Sir, you don't know something. In fact, a large part of the reason why casual cultivators have low cultivation is because of their living environment. They do not have the strength to occupy spiritual veins, so they can only wander in the wild. If you can live in an area with strong spiritual energy, no one wants to leave. After saying this, Zhou Daocheng understood immediately. It's not that casual cultivators really like to live a wandering life without a fixed address. They only do this if they really have no choice. If they really found a spiritual vein suitable for cultivation, they would have become the king of the mountain and developed into a family or power. Who would like to be a vagabond when they have nothing to do? This is why Meng Yushin knew that the island had been occupied, but still resolutely carried out a sneak attack, and did not retreat even after discovering that Zhou Daocheng was an array master. It's because the meaning represented by spiritual veins is so important. This means that they can completely get rid of their original identity and become a dominant force. Zhou Daocheng thought about it for a long time, but in the end he did not change his mind and said, I will arrange the spirit gathering array for you and introduce some spiritual veins to you. Follow my plan. Hearing Zhou Daocheng's decisive tone, Meng Yushin had no choice but to agree. He could vaguely see that his young master also had an extremely domineering personality. Since Zhou Daocheng made such a decision, he must have carefully considered it and would not make changes easily. Zhou Daocheng took Meng Yushin directly to the mountains south of Balin Lake. There is no outward passage to the south. It can only be climbed over here. The 3 men from Mengyu Mountain climbed over it. After crossing the mountain, there is a steep mountain range behind, and then there is a valley with lush plants growing in a very complex environment. However, when you reach the bottom of the valley, the terrain becomes relatively flat, but the spiritual energy is still not strong. If you practice here, it will most likely be difficult to break through to the 9th level of qi refining before the age of 70. No wonder Meng Yushin disliked the weak spiritual energy outside and wanted to stay on the island. Zhou Daocheng looked at it and asked, Meng Yushin, what do you think of building a station near here? Meng Yushin was absent-minded, but still replied, the terrain is flat, the location is hidden, and the area in the valley is not small. It is completely enough to build a power. But the core issue is the spiritual vein. Don't worry about the spiritual pulse, I will take care of it. Zhou Daocheng interrupted him directly, already having some ideas in his mind. Climbing up the mountain again, Zhou Daocheng measured from a high place, calculated the position of the island and the valley outside, determined the general direction, and drew a sketch. The valley is not far from Balin Lake. Although it seems to be completely separated, it is only because the mountain is extremely high and steep, and it is very difficult to climb over. But in fact, the straight line distance is only a quarter of an hour. Zhou Daocheng drew a line on the sketch and pointed and said, Meng Yushan, you and Huangzhou and Zhang Yin should spend some effort in the next few days to open a passage between the valley and Balin Lake through this line. After that, Zhou Daocheng looked at Meng Yushan with extremely sincere eyes, only to see that the corner of his mouth twitched, and he almost fell to the ground with dizziness. Sir, your mission. Are you kidding me? Zhou Daocheng raised his eyebrows. Is this a very troublesome thing? Just use the magic tool to dig. The actual distance is actually very close. Meng Yushan said with a sad face. Sir, digging is one part, but it is not an easy thing to find the path you arranged underground accurately. Zhou Daocheng glanced at him. Are you stupid? Is the treasure hunting rat that found my cave a place for nothing? Meng Yushan was stunned, touched his head that had not been washed for a long time, and exclaimed, It seems to be possible. Zhou Daocheng threw the sketch to Meng Yushan and arranged, If you figure it out, do it quickly. When the time comes, I will lead the spiritual vein and you can move here to live. Meng Yushan and his two companions were quite clever. They used the treasure hunting rat's sensitivity to spiritual energy to determine the shortest path between the island and the valley outside. Next, it was a relatively easy but time-consuming excavation. This project lasted for a whole week. Meng Yushan and his two companions worked day and night and tried their best to successfully dig a passage in the mountain that was only for one person to enter and exit. After it was opened, the entrance height was level with the surface of Balin Lake, and the lake water directly poured into it and flowed toward the valley outside. All this was already in Zhou Daocheng's plan. In the valley outside, a pool had been dug in advance, about 10 feet wide, which could be used to store lake water. Once the passage was opened, the pool in the valley was directly filled with lake water. Later, Zhou Daocheng had the idea of spiritual veins. Since the spiritual liquid flowing out of the spiritual spring eye can form a first-level middle-grade spiritual vein after entering Balin Lake, can a new spiritual vein be artificially created? Zhou Daocheng thought it was feasible. As long as the root is arranged and a small spiritual liquid is let out, it can flow directly into the channel dug in the mountain, and then flow into the pool outside, thus artificially creating a spiritual vein. And it is not very difficult to operate, as long as the spiritual liquid does not spread when passing through Balin Lake. The natural spiritual vein in Balin Lake has actually spread completely, making the entire Balin Lake full of spiritual energy, which is not a good phenomenon. On the one hand, large-scale spiritual energy fluctuations are likely to attract the attention of other cultivators, thereby attracting foreign enemies, resulting in reduced concealment and safety of Balin Lake. On the other hand, it will also greatly reduce the concentration of spiritual energy and waste a lot of spiritual energy. Therefore, when Zhou Daocheng created this spiritual vein, he planned to change to a more spiritual energy-saving method. However, this method requires some high-quality materials, which need to be purchased in Baihifeng City. Zhou Daocheng thought about it and felt that he really needed to go to Baihifeng City recently. In addition to the materials for guiding the spiritual vein, the formation materials also need to be supplemented. The last batch of array materials has been used up, and with his amazing comprehension, he has been able to skillfully arrange a first-level low-grade array. Now it is time to get in touch with a first-level middle-grade array. The top first-level middle-grade array can reach the late stage of qi refining, barely catching up with the current strength, and can really assist in combat. Zhou Daocheng called Huangzhou and Zhang Yin and ordered, Huangzhou, Zhang Yin, go to Baihei Market and buy some things for me. As he spoke, he took out the spirit stone from the storage bag and threw it directly to the two. Huangzhou did not ask, but just said, Okay, sir, what do you need to buy specifically? I will make a list for you, just buy according to it. Zhou Daocheng took out a pen and paper, listed the materials he needed on it, and then handed it to Huangzhou, and then said, Be smart when the time comes, go to several different shops to buy. Although, in the process of listing the materials for the formation, Zhou Daocheng has already messed up the materials for different formations, and even if ordinary cultivators see all the materials, they can't find any clues at all, but for the sake of safety, it is better to buy them separately as much as possible. At the same time, Zhou Daocheng has also calculated the prices of all the materials, just enough to use up all the spirit stones. Among them, a special kind of wood is needed to pull the spirit veins, the spirit sealing wood. It is generally used to make boxes, which can store the overall natural materials and treasures to prevent the dissipation of spiritual energy. The price is medium, and it takes about 50 spirit stones. In addition, buying 2 sets of first-level low-grade falling rock formations costs about 90 spirit stones, which is more expensive than the last time. Because the materials for the formation this time are slightly different. The array materials purchased last time were mainly used to arrange the array on the spot. This time, they were used to refine the array disc. Since Zhou Daocheng was not convenient to arrange the array, he could only settle for the second best and earn spirit stones by selling array discs. Of course, this is also the way most array masters earn spirit stones. After all, array discs are more convenient to use, can be carried with you, and arranged in different terrains. They are much more powerful than talismans and can be used multiple times. Many hunting teams of various forces are willing to equip 1 or 2 sets of arrays if conditions permit, which greatly improves combat power. If there are multiple 9th-level Qi refining cultivators, using first-level upper-grade arrays to besiege second-level monsters, there is a certain chance that they will be hunted to death, which is enough to show the power of the array. So this time, Zhou Daocheng plans to refine 2 sets of first-level lower-grade array discs, and try to sell them initially, so as to open up a new channel for obtaining spirit stones. Finally, there will be about 80 spirit stones left, and Zhou Daocheng plans to buy a first-level middle-grade array. As for the type of formation, Zhou Daocheng thought about it again and again, and finally chose a formation called Golden Sword Formation. A formation dedicated to attack and killing, under the full control of the formation master. The power of the instant burst is extremely strong, and it can even be as strong as the 7th-level Qi refining cultivator. Because Zhou Daocheng practiced the Wutu Kun Yu Gong, his physical strength, defense ability, sustained combat ability, total mana and recovery ability are all top-notch, but the only thing he lacks is the ability to attack, and this formation can just make up for this deficiency. Huang Zhou and Zhang Yin are experienced, and there is no danger for them to go to Baihifang City as a team, so Zhou Daocheng can rest assured. As for whether they will escape, Zhou Daocheng is not worried at all. The function of spiritual magic is not only to control their life and death in face-to-face situations, but also to be effective at any time. No matter how far away they are, Zhou Daocheng can control their lives with just one thought, and even running away is useless. What's more, Zhou Daocheng did not treat them badly during their time living on the island, and their lives were even much more comfortable than when they were casual cultivators. More than half a month later, Huang Zhou and Zhang Yin returned smoothly, earlier than Zhou Daocheng expected. Sir, I have bought all the materials you asked for. We negotiated the price and left a dozen spiritual stones. They are all here. With that said, Huang Zhou took out a storage bag and handed it directly to Zhou Daocheng. Zhou Daocheng swept his mind away and briefly checked the materials. After confirming that they were correct, he took action and patted Huang Zhou's shoulder. Well done. After the spiritual veins are arranged, I will find a place with strong spiritual energy. Cave. Huang Zhou was flattered. Thank you, sir, for the reward. As a casual cultivator, her biggest wish was to have a stable place to practice with strong cultivation. The reward given by Zhou Daocheng was undoubtedly what she longed for most. Zhou Daocheng waved his hand and started to arrange it directly without wasting time. After all, the journey of cultivation may seem long, but in fact it is like a fleeting cloud. If you slack off even a little bit, you will not be able to see the path to immortality. Take out the soul-sealing wood. The quality is only the first-grade middle grade, but there is no other way. It is really short of money, and can only afford the first-grade upper grade. The wood has been processed, and the wood core has been completely hollowed out to form a hollow structure, which is convenient for the spiritual liquid to flow, so as to introduce it into the mountain cave. All Zhou Daocheng needs to do is to carry out simple processing and connect more than a dozen soul-sealing wood. When he came to the underground cave, Zhou Daocheng first dug a passage from the inside of the cave to the Balin Lake for placing the soul-sealing wood. The soul-sealing wood leads to the mountain through the lake, connecting the two places for the transportation of spiritual liquid. Then, the most important thing is to draw a spiritual vein from the spiritual spring. Make a small opening to lead out a thin spiritual liquid, and let it to the outside valley without affecting the operation of the spiritual spring itself. After doing all this, only a quarter of an hour later, Meng Yushan's surprised voice came from the communication stone. My lord, the spring water here has really become a spiritual spring. Meng Yushan is currently in the valley. If a spiritual spring appears there, it means that the spiritual vein is very smoothly activated. Zhou Daocheng also breathed a sigh of relief. It is a very dangerous thing to artificially create a spiritual vein. If you are not careful, you may destroy the entire spiritual spring eye. However, strictly speaking, this is not considered to be creating a spiritual vein. It can only be said that it is to use the spiritual spring liquid to dilute a batch of spiritual spring water. However, the effect is not bad. It can maintain the problem of insufficient cultivation of Meng Yushan and others. The huge amount of spiritual spring water can also irrigate the spiritual field, assist in cultivation, etc., and it is not a problem to support a small force. Back to the island, Zhou Daocheng went directly to the opposite valley through the passage. The gurgling spring water flowed out, and the spiritual energy was mixed in the spring water, emitting a faint white mist, which made people feel refreshed after smelling it. The pool in the valley outside was already filled with spring water, and the spiritual energy above was lingering, making the surrounding weeds full of vitality. The concentration of spiritual energy in the valley also increased a lot, almost reaching the first level middle grade, and even close to the first level upper grade, which was a bit more concentrated than the spiritual energy of Balin Lake. Seeing Zhou Daocheng coming, Meng Yushan walked over excitedly. Sir, I didn't expect it to be true. This spiritual vein is about to reach the first level upper grade. It's incredible. Huang Zhou couldn't hide his joy. He grabbed the soil on the ground and said in shock, the soil nearby is gradually turning into a spiritual field under the irrigation of the spiritual spring. This place can be used as a base for a force or family. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that after being a casual cultivator for a lifetime, I could still practice in this environment in the end. Zhang Yin was so happy that he cried. Zhou Daocheng looked at the few people helplessly. Although he was in a good mood, he was not as excited as Meng Yushan and the other two. Okay, you guys look for a suitable place to open a cave, and use it as your base in the future. Meng Yushan looked around, touched his beard, and said seriously, Sir, the spiritual energy in the mountain passage is the most concentrated, and it is also the main body of this spiritual vein. I plan to open a cave directly in the mountain. All right. Zhou Daocheng had no objection and nodded in approval. It's good to live directly in the mountain, and I can just take care of the spiritual vein to prevent accidents. Looking around again, Zhou Daocheng suddenly found that the diluted spiritual spring pool in the valley was directly exposed to the air, and the spiritual energy dissipated very quickly. This is not a good phenomenon. If the spiritual energy dissipates too quickly, most of it will be wasted, and the consumption of the spiritual spring will also be very fast. In addition, the large-scale diffusion of spiritual energy is likely to attract the attention of cultivators and monsters, allowing others to discover this hidden valley. After repeated consideration, Zhou Daocheng returned to the island, dismantled his set of gathering spirit formation, and then rearranged it in this valley. The spirit gathering array covered the pool, immediately effectively preventing the spread of spiritual energy, making the spiritual energy in the valley more concentrated and less likely to be discovered by other cultivators. After doing all this valley settlement took shape. The rich spiritual energy, hidden location, and relatively spacious living environment were enough to support the development of a small force. After clapping his hands, Zhou Daocheng called Meng Yushan, who was digging a cave, and said, the environment in the valley is good and the terrain is relatively flat. We can irrigate the spiritual fields and plant some spiritual fields in the future. We should be able to be self-sufficient. Meng Yushan nodded seriously, excitedly, my lord, I think so too. This valley is not small. I estimate that more than 20 acres of spiritual fields can be reclaimed. When the time comes, all of them will be used to provide a stable supply of cultivation resources. If we are free on weekdays, we can also go out to hunt wild animals and use other means to obtain spiritual stones. The harvest should not be low. As he spoke, Meng Yushan suddenly frowned and sighed with some embarrassment. It's a pity that we are short of manpower. If we can get more manpower. This sentence suddenly inspired some ideas of Zhou Daocheng. He couldn't help but brighten his eyes and asked, Meng Yushan, manpower is not a problem. Are there other casual cultivators nearby? Hearing this, Meng Yushan was stunned at first, and then immediately reacted, keenly aware of the deep meaning in the words. Sir, are you planning to recruit another group of independent cultivators? Meng Yushan asked in a low voice. Zhou Daocheng did not hide his thoughts and said, if we really want to grow and develop, it is not enough to rely on just the three of you. Indeed, Meng Yushan nodded, and said with some concern, however, the casual cultivators who can move around nearby are not very strong, but they are not too weak. How strong are the casual cultivators around here? Are they similar to your configuration? Meng Yushin introduced. Some pure casual cultivators may act alone. Their strength is generally strong, probably in the late stage of qi refining, and may even reach the foundation establishment stage. Zhou Daocheng frowned slightly. He didn't believe that casual cultivators of this strength, who dared to act alone, didn't have some skills. However, as long as their strength did not reach the foundation establishment stage, they could be fearless in a one-on-many situation. What about casual cultivators like you? Most casual cultivators, if they go out to hunt wild animals, will also form a small team similar to ours, with about 5 to 10 people and similar configurations. The leader is in the late stage of qi refining, and the others are probably in the middle stage of qi refining. Meng Yushin said. Zhou Daocheng thought for a moment and asked cautiously, what is the strength of you 6 rounds among the independent cultivators? If it is in this area, it should be barely able to reach the upper middle level. After getting this answer, Zhou Daocheng finally had a general understanding of the strength of independent cultivators. Okay, you stay here first. Explore the surrounding situation recently. If there are other arrangements, I will come to you. Zhou Daocheng said a few words and returned directly to the island. After watering and fertilizing the spiritual field, Zhou Daocheng simply cooked some spiritual rice. Each grain was crystal clear and full, with a sweet and soft taste, and a strong sense of protection. The only flaw was the lack of some spiritual vegetables. Eating only spiritual rice was really a bit choking. When the spiritual field in the valley is well irrigated in the future, we must plant more spiritual plants of the same type to improve the quality of life. After filling his stomach, Zhou Daocheng returned to the underground cave while thinking and stayed at home peacefully. He habitually glanced at the purple green spiritual bamboo and the black patterned lotus in the spiritual spring, and then Zhou Daocheng's eyes lit up and he uttered a surprised sigh. The black patterned lotus sprouted. A few days ago, he had put the black patterned lotus seeds into the spiritual spring. There had been no reaction before, and it had always maintained a weak vitality, but there was no sign of sprouting. But at this time, the outer layer of the seed's dark brown coat was torn open, and a tender white bud emerged, with more than twice the vitality. In the rich spiritual liquid, the second-level middle-grade black patterned lotus, with a probability so low that it was negligible, actually came to life. Zhou Daocheng was so excited that he couldn't express it in words. This was the highest quality spiritual plant he had ever come into contact with. If it could mature smoothly, the spiritual stone income that this black patterned lotus could bring would definitely exceed 5,000 low-grade spiritual stones. As far as Zhou Daocheng knew, even in the entire Zhou family, the highest quality spiritual plant planted was only the second-level middle grade, which was obtained by the previous patriarch at an auction at a large amount of spiritual stones. Now it has been planted in the Tianqi and is one of the most precious treasures in the family. Moreover, the germination of this seed in front of him represents more than just a black patterned lotus. It means that the environment of this spiritual spring is very suitable for the growth of black patterned lotus, so it can be planted for a long time in the future, which is a long-term benefit. With excitement, Zhou Daocheng checked the purple qi green bamboo again. After these days of growth, the level of the purple qi green bamboo has been getting closer to the second level, and it is only one step away from successfully breaking through the original level. This green bamboo, which was originally only the first grade upper grade, is gradually transforming into a more precious natural treasure under the nurturing of the innate purple qi. The 6 green bamboo shoots are also growing vigorously, and their size has increased a lot. They are also greener than ordinary green bamboos, and are stained with a trace of purple qi. The quality has reached the first grade middle grade. Zhou Daocheng is almost certain that after absorbing the innate purple qi, the quality of the purple qi green bamboo can definitely reach the second grade. Zhou Daocheng's eyes flickered, and his thoughts surged in his heart. In the formation inheritance, there seems to be a formation called Green Spirit Sword Formation, which uses green bamboo as the main body. The level reaches the first grade upper grade, both offensive and defensive, and the power is very powerful. This formation is what he kept in mind when he first checked the formation inheritance. After all, among the formation materials of Bai Ling sword formation, the most precious Bai Ling bamboo happened to be in his possession, and it was the higher quality purple qi Bai Ling bamboo. If he could set up the Bai Ling sword formation, the power would be absolutely terrifying, and it would be very likely to reach the peak of the first grade upper grade. It seems that I have to speed up. I hope that before the Bai Ling bamboo shoots mature, I can successfully become a first grade upper grade formation master. Zhou Daocheng secretly made up his mind and set a goal for himself. Returning to the training room, He took out the formation inheritance, found the formation diagram of the first grade middle grade golden sword formation, and devoted himself to studying it. The first grade lower grade formation is relatively simple, but it is just the foundation of the formation, and the first grade lower grade formation master can only be regarded as an entry level. The first grade middle grade formation is more complicated, and the difficulty of setting up is completely different. It took Zhou Daocheng half a month just to learn and memorize the content of the formation diagram. Golden sword formation is mainly used for attacking. When controlled by the formation master, its power can reach the late 7th level of Qi training, which should not be underestimated in the Qi training stage. However, Zhou Daocheng does not plan to set up this formation in the underground cave, because it is already very safe here. To the north of the island is the island of Zhou Daobai and Zhao Yunji. If there is any danger, they will definitely pass through them first. As for the south, it was indeed necessary to take precautions in the past to prevent someone from crossing the peak to Balin Lake like Meng Yushin and others, but now it is completely unnecessary. Meng Yushin and his 3 men are stationed in the southern valley. Anyone who wants to come here needs to pass through them, which greatly improves safety. Therefore, Zhou Daocheng plans to set up this golden sword formation directly in the valley, which is the most likely place for fighting. If a set of first-level medium-grade formation can be set up, the defense will be much better. After conducting a field survey, Zhou Daocheng found that the valley was generally east-west oriented, with a relatively wide terrain in the middle and narrow terrain on both sides. The Lingquan pool was right in the middle, with enough space to arrange the golden sword formation. However, the widest area in the middle was needed to irrigate the spiritual fields and plant spiritual plants, so it was not suitable to occupy too much. At this time, Meng Yushin gave a suggestion. Sir, there is a small road on the east side of this valley. If people outside want to come in, they can only enter from there. That's what we did at the time. Can't we come in from other directions? Zhou Daocheng asked in confusion. Meng Yushin thought for a while and said, the mountains in other directions are too high, and the terrain outside is very complicated. Only there is a gap in the east, which can be seen at a glance. Anyone with a sound mind should come from the east. Walk. I see. Zhou Daocheng was thoughtful, but for safety reasons, he still went outside the valley to conduct a personal survey of the mountain. After all, this was his territory, and he would spend at least a long time here. Even if the family agrees, it will not be a problem to stay here forever in the future. Therefore, you can never be too careful. The terrain outside is indeed as Meng Yushin said. Except for the obvious road to the east, the rest is full of rugged rocks, with many fractures and deep ditches, making it impossible to pass. In that case, the east side is indeed the only entrance. After Zhou Daocheng confirmed it, he inspected the east entrance and confirmed the location of the formation. This time, the process of arranging the formation was not easy. After all, it was a first-order mid-level formation, and the process was not a little complicated. So after all, there were some minor accidents. Because of slight errors, the entire formation fell short. Fortunately, only a small part was destroyed, and other materials could still be used, so the damage was not magnified. After 2 adjustments and improvements, and a lot of effort, this set of first-level mid-grade golden sword formation was finally successfully arranged. Zhou Daocheng was also successfully promoted to a first-level mid-level array mage. Call Meng Yushin and 3 people and give them the method of controlling the formation. If an enemy invades here in the future, they will be blocked directly with the golden sword formation. Moreover, the terrain here is easy to defend and difficult to attack. With the help of Meng Yushin and 3 people, with such strength, it would not be a problem to block a strong person at the 9th level of Qi training. After doing this, Meng Yushin found Zhou Daocheng and said, Sir, the settlement here is considered complete. There are still many open spaces in the valley. We plan to open up spiritual fields. Which crops do you think are more suitable for planting? Have you measured the specific scope? How many spiritual fields can be reclaimed? A conservative estimate of 15 acres. If you add in the scattered land in the surrounding corners, it will probably be closer to 18 acres. Meng Yushin had obviously already understood it and answered directly without much thought. The number of spiritual fields that can be cultivated is less than Zhou Daocheng expected. He originally thought that more than 20 acres could be cultivated. But thinking about it, this valley seems to be quite large, but in fact it is long and strip-shaped, and the actual usable area is not very large. After Zhou Daocheng considered it, he said, then cultivate 15 acres. The remaining area can be used for other purposes. You can water all these 15 acres of spiritual fields into first-level high-grade spiritual fields. As for the seeds, we will go there together later. Buy it in Baihifang City. When he was on the island, he was worried that the quality of the spiritual field would be too high and would attract the attention of the family, so he did not dare to raise the level unscrupulously. However, in this hidden valley, Zhou Daocheng could water it with confidence and boldness. A week later, when Zhou Daocheng came to the valley again, 15 acres of high-quality spiritual land had been cultivated and evenly arranged around the Lingquan pool. It contained rich spiritual energy and was very different from ordinary soil. Sir, are you going to Baihifang City? Meng Yushin's face glowed red, his aura strengthened a lot, and it was obvious that his spiritual veins had played a lot of role. The same goes for Huang Zhou and Zhang Yin. They used to be casual cultivators with no fixed place and no fixed spiritual vein cultivation. They barely reached the 6th and 7th levels of qi refining when they were over 40 years old. Now that they have spiritual veins, they have devoted themselves almost wholeheartedly to cultivation. The aura on Zhang Yin's body has almost reached the peak of the 6th level of qi refining, and is about to break through to the 7th level of qi refining. Zhou Daocheng nodded and said, "You guys pack up and let's go to Baihifang City together." Half a month later, a group of 4 people came to Baihifang City. When Zhou Daocheng was about to go to the grocery store to select the seeds he needed to buy, he was interrupted by a voice behind him. Meng Yushin. Zhou Daocheng turned around curiously and saw a tall and thin man walking from a distance. He was dressed in green cloth and linen and had the 8th level of qi refining. As he approached, the tall and lanky man said, "Old Meng, have you found a perfect place to hunt monsters recently? You have disappeared for such a long time. Seeing that your face is glowing, it seems that you have gained a good harvest." Meng Yushin frowned slightly and looked at Zhou Daocheng with a questioning look, as if he was worried about being misunderstood. Zhou Daocheng didn't say much, gave him a look that let him do whatever he wanted, and then retreated to the rear. After receiving Zhou Daocheng's promise, Meng Yushin glanced at this person casually and said, "What? Meng disappeared for a few days. Do you still miss Lin?" "Haha, that's not the case, but you and I are old acquaintances. If we have the opportunity to hunt monsters together, I would be very happy." The tall and thin man smiled and wanted to reach out to hook Meng Yushin's shoulders, but Meng Yushin was stopped by him. Yushin avoided in disgust. Zhou Daocheng could tell that the two of them had known each other for a long time. They might have had some minor conflicts before, but the overall relationship was pretty good, and they were probably Zhou Daocheng's friends. "If nothing else, what's the point of stopping me on the street?" Meng Yushin said angrily. "Haha, it's okay. Did you know that Zion Pavilion recently organized an auction in Baihifang City?" "Auction," Meng Yushin said thoughtfully, "a large-scale auction under the name of Zion Pavilion." "Yes, Baihifang City is not Defang City. It is not easy to hold an auction like this. Let's go and see it together then." Meng Yushin thought for a moment and refused. "Let's just go together, but I will go and have a look when I have time." "Okay, I won't delay you any longer." It can be seen that the relationship between the two parties is good. After the two parties communicated for a while, they said goodbye and separated. Meng Yushin, who is this person? Is he also a casual cultivator of this generation? After everyone left, Zhou Daocheng came out from behind and asked with interest. Meng Yushin explained briefly. "Yes, sir, I had just broken through the 7th level of qi training and joined a seniors hunting team. Lin Yuan was also among them at that time. He was also at the 7th level of qi training, so there was a period of friendship, and this person has a good temperament, so even if they separated later, they will always be in contact." Quote. Zhou Daocheng nodded. Among casual cultivators, they also have their own circles. This is normal. What's going on at the auction? As such that Meng Yushin knew that although Zhou Daocheng was powerful and a noble formation master, his experience in all aspects was immature and he was not experienced in the world, so he explained in detail. Among monks, there are generally 2 forms of item exchange meetings. One of them is a small-scale secret exchange meeting. It is usually led by some monks with higher status and invites some monks with similar strength to exchange items. Most of them there are many barter exchanges and you can participate in them from time to time. The other type is a large auction led by some big forces or large chambers of commerce. It is relatively formal and has higher quality resources, but the number is relatively small, especially in a small market like Baihei Market. It is possible that there may not be one for several years. After hearing this, Zhou Daocheng understood. He knew about auctions, and had heard about them from his family elders, but he had never participated in one. As for small exchange meetings, this was the first time Zhou Daocheng had heard of them, which was considered to have broadened his horizons. Can we participate in the auction? Zhou Daocheng asked. For small auctions like this, you can participate as long as you pay the ticket fee. Meng Yushan replied. I see. Zhou Daocheng nodded slightly, and then asked, can such an auction be auctioned by consignment? Meng Yushan scratched his head, thought for a long time and said ambiguously, I'm not sure about this, it should be possible, but there are probably some restrictions, it's impossible to take all items to the auction. Zhou Daocheng rubbed his eyebrows. It seems that Meng Yushan doesn't know much about this, so he didn't ask any more questions, but made a decision, go buy seeds first, and then go to the auction. Zhou Daocheng has considered the seeds he needs to buy this time. 15 mu of first-grade spiritual fields must be planted with first-grade spiritual plants to maximize the benefits. Zhou Daocheng needs to consider two aspects. One is to improve strength and meet his own cultivation needs. The other is economic value, which can earn more spiritual stones. If he considers cultivation, he will naturally choose to plant spiritual grains and earth essence grass as last time. Long-term use can improve the speed of cultivation and break through to the 8th level of qi refining as soon as possible. As for which spiritual plants can be exchanged for more spiritual stones, Zhou Daocheng himself was not clear, so he asked the experienced Meng Yushan, but Meng Yushan was also very embarrassed about this question. If there is a spiritual plant that can obtain more spiritual energy after planting, wouldn't everyone plant it? Zhou Daocheng thought so too. His demand was too vague. So after some thought, he chose to settle for the second best. After careful consideration, he chose a spiritual plant that was useless to others but could create greater value in his hands. Yellow thorn vine. This is a first-level spiritual plant, which is generally of the first-level medium or high grade. It has high requirements for the growth environment and requires rich spiritual energy to grow high-quality yellow thorn vine. This kind of spiritual plant is actually relatively less useful. It can neither be used for alchemy nor for making talismans, but it can be used as a material for refining weapons and whip-like weapons. However, among the materials of the same level, other exquisite materials such as green-stemmed spiritual vine are more suitable for refining weapons. This leads to the very awkward positioning of yellow thorn vine. Although it can be planted, the spiritual stone income is very low, and few people pay attention to it. However, in the array inheritance obtained by Zhou Daocheng, there are exactly 2 powerful arrays that need to use yellow thorn vine. Generally speaking, array diagrams are extremely precious and are not widely circulated in the market. In addition to the master-disciple inheritance, array masters rarely communicate with each other in other situations, so this is Zhou Daocheng's unique array. One is called Thorn Vine Formation, a first-level medium-grade formation, which combines control and attack effects. Whether it is fighting against the enemy or hunting wild beasts, it has very good effects. The other is called 100 Vine Formation, a first-level high-grade formation, which is considered an advanced version of Thorn Vine Formation. The yellow thorn vine used is of higher quality and more in quantity, so the attack and control effects are also stronger, and the number of thorn vines released is more, and the power is not bad. The main material used in these 2 formations is yellow thorn vine, and the formation itself has a wide range of uses. Whether it is family forces or casual cultivators, it can be used, and there is no worry about sales. After making a decision, Zhou Daocheng no longer hesitated. In the end, a large number of yellow thorn vine seedlings were purchased. The price was not expensive, but it also consumed all the spirit stones on his body. After purchasing, Meng Yushan found an inn and stayed temporarily in Baihifang City. It can be clearly seen that the flow of people in Baihifang Market has increased in the past few days. The hawking on the street has become much louder. Many independent cultivators have also returned from the wilderness. Many family forces have come here specifically, obviously to participate in the auction of Zion Pavilion. At such a turbulent time, Zhou Daocheng is more low-key and unwilling to get into trouble, so he has been practicing in the inn. Each room in the inn has a strong sound insulation effect and very good confidentiality. As long as you don't go out, there will be no accidents. However, today, before the auction starts, Zhou Daocheng plans to go to Zion Pavilion. After all, although the 4 people plan to participate in the auction, they are short of money and don't even have a low-grade spirit stone on them. It is really a bit shabby. At present, the only things Zhou Daocheng can sell in exchange for spirit stones are only 2 items. 2 sets of falling stone formations and 2 bottles of undiluted spirit spring liquid. Although the quality of the falling rock formation is only the first grade inferior, it is a formation after all, and its price is far higher than that of items of the same level, with a market price of about 200 inferior spiritual stones. The spiritual spring liquid is also of high value, because although most forces have spiritual veins, they do not have treasures such as the spiritual spring eye, so it is impossible to obtain such a rich spiritual essence. Moreover, this kind of extremely rich spiritual liquid with the quality of the second grade has a wide range of uses. If some is added during the process of alchemy and refining, there is a high probability of improving the success rate and quality. Zhou Daocheng conservatively estimated that a small bottle of palm-sized spiritual spring liquid is worth more than 500 spiritual stones. If it is at the auction, the price should be higher. The value of 2 bottles exceeds 1,000 inferior spiritual stones. Therefore, before the auction begins, Zhou Daocheng must go to Zion Pavilion in advance to find a way to sell the falling rock formation and the spiritual spring liquid, or add these 2 items to the auction. Zhou Daocheng did not call Zhang Yin and Huang Zhou, but left alone with Meng Yushan and went to Zion Pavilion. Meng Yushan was still dressed as usual, and Zhou Daocheng also wore a black robe and covered his face to prevent his identity from being exposed. Because both the formation and the existence of the spiritual spring liquid were very sensitive and not suitable to be revealed in front of people, of course, including Zhou Daocheng's identity. Not only would it lead to the disaster of killing, it might also bring some unnecessary trouble to the Zhou family, so if necessary, the identity must be concealed. At the same time, Zhou Daocheng was also thinking about a problem in his mind. As his main means, the formation will need to be sold frequently in the future. It's okay once or twice, but you can't wear a black robe to cover your identity every time you trade, right? It seems that I need to think of a way to find a suitable identity to trade. Zhou Daocheng thought about it. Letting this matter sink deep in his heart is something to consider during the next period of time. All the way to Zion Pavilion. The shop is tall and noble, 4 stories high. It is made of special scented wood. Right above it is a huge plaque with 3 gilt characters, Zion Pavilion. Meng Yushan walked in front and went straight to the depths of the store, but he did not find a higher status steward, so he randomly found a clerk and asked bluntly, "Is the store manager here?" The clerk with a mustache looked at Meng Yushan and said, "What do you want? If you want to buy something, you can talk to me directly." Meng Yushan shook his head. "You can't talk about selling resources. Your Excellency, please don't underestimate me. Although my status is not high, I can still make the final decision on the purchase and sale of ordinary cultivation resources." The mustached clerk stroked his beard, and it seemed that he had high qualifications. Meng Yushan looked back at Zhou Daocheng, as if seeking advice. Zhou Daocheng nodded slightly, and then Meng Yushan took out a set of formations and said, "Can you also make the final decision on the selection of items for the auction?" Seeing the items that Meng Yushan took out, the Bazaihu's eyes widened, he lowered his posture, and there was an awkward smile in his eyes. He hurriedly said, "I'll go find the manager right away." 5 minutes later, a woman with a graceful figure walked down from the second floor. The woman has a graceful figure, wearing a lavender cheongsam. Her slender waist is slightly twisted, twisting like a water snake to outline a perfect curve, and the exposed thigh skin reveals an alluring rhythm. "Sir, go upstairs and talk." Her smoky eyes looked past Meng Yushan in front of her. The woman looked at Zhou Daocheng behind her and spoke softly. Zhou Daocheng raised his eyebrows slightly, secretly thinking that this woman was not simple. Her every move was full of charm, but her aura was unpredictable, and her strength was definitely not weak. He calmly stepped upstairs and looked at Yu's twisting waist in front of him. For a time, the sun and menstruation in the body moved involuntarily, and a mysterious feeling appeared in my heart. Zhou Daocheng's eyes narrowed slightly, and his thoughts seemed to be out of control. He could vaguely feel that the talent of the woman in front of him seemed to be higher than that of Zhao Yunji, which made his body involuntarily feel a desire. It would be great if I could sleep with this girl for one night. Before he could finish thinking about it, Zhou Daocheng was shocked. He quickly suppressed this thought, suppressed the desire in his heart, and at the same time became vigilant. The secret method of sun and menstruation is really terrible. It actually messed up my mind. Zhou Daocheng has a lot of thoughts, but fortunately, at present, this influence is not very serious, but when a woman with higher talent appears, it will make Zhou Daocheng feel inexplicably possessive. Even though the impact was not big, Zhou Daocheng still made up his mind to be more careful to avoid turning himself into a beast. However, it is not completely without disadvantages. At least this ability to sense other people's talents can be regarded as a unique method. As if she felt the gaze behind her, Aunt Chin Mu, who was walking in front, frowned, and her voice was soft and sweet. Have you seen enough, fellow Taoist? Do you need the little woman to walk again so that fellow Taoist can enjoy it? Quote. The expressions of the two people behind him froze, and the situation suddenly felt awkward. At the critical moment, Zhou Daocheng quickly lowered his voice and said sternly, Ahem, Xiaomang, don't be unreasonable. Although this girl is beautiful, fragrant, and has an all-powerful appearance, she is really shocking to everyone in the world, but you can't do it either. I kept staring, apologized to the girl. Meng Yushin's pupils widened, and he was speechless and choked. His face turned red. After a long time, he held back a sentence. I just lost my temper below. I hope the girl will forgive me. Aunt Chin Mu raised her eyebrows, couldn't help but twitch the corners of her mouth, and shook her head helplessly. After entering the room on the second floor, Aunt Chin Mu skillfully asked Zhou Daocheng to sit down, and made tea elegantly and gracefully, with very sophisticated movements. Zhou Daocheng's eyes flickered. Although this person looked very delicate and charming, and was experienced in dealing with things, judging from his age, he was definitely no more than 30 years old. Strictly speaking, she was slightly older than Zhou Daocheng. The contrast between her age and her sophistication made Zhou Daocheng a little curious and a little more vigilant. Fellow Taoist, please have some tea. Aunt Chin Mu pushed a cup of hot tea forward and said, this is a private room, and there will be no outsiders to disturb you. You can take off your robe without worries. Maybe it will be better if you and I can talk frankly. The soft touch of red lips and the soft voice are refreshing. Even the experienced Meng Yushin couldn't help but swallow his saliva, and was a little afraid to look directly. Zhou Daocheng's mental power was strong enough to suppress the influence of sun and menstruation, so he was not affected. He lowered his voice and said, forget about taking off your robe. Please respect yourself, girl. It's just for transaction. No need to say anything else. Aunt Chin Mu smiled faintly, thinking that the person in front of her was pretending to be serious and did not take it seriously. She said directly, since fellow Taoist is so cheerful, let's get to the point directly. Zhou Daocheng didn't say much, and took out 2 sets of falling stone formations and placed them on the table between the two of them. Aunt Chin Mu glanced over it and didn't pay much attention at first. After all, the quality of the formation can be seen at a glance, and it is only a first-level low-grade one. Although formations are rare, there are always some families that have formation inheritance. After these formations are circulated in the market, some powerful forces can still obtain some. However, when Aunt Chin Mu took a closer look, she showed a surprised expression. Your 2 sets of formations are not from the Huang family on Luoyan Island. Huang family. Zhou Daocheng was stunned, and the information about this family immediately appeared in his mind, and he instantly understood why the other party asked such a question. In the entire Qingshan sect, there are not many families with complete formation inheritance, and they are near Baihifang City. The only ones who can sell formations in Baihifang City are the Huang family of Luoyan Island. This is a very powerful foundation-building family, at least much stronger than the Zhou family. It has 7 strong foundation-building experts with a solid inheritance, and the strongest one has reached the 8th level of foundation building. Whenever a formation appears near Baihifang City, it is likely to come from the Huang family on Luoyan Island. Because of this, Aunt Chin Mu preconceived the idea that Zhou Daocheng was from the Huang family. But when I saw the falling stone formation in a blink of an eye, I dismissed this speculation. Precisely because the Huang family is famous, most people are well aware of the several first-order low-grade formations they possess, but there is absolutely no such falling stone formation in front of them. Zhou Daocheng's eyes were calm. He shook his head and said, I am not from the Huang family. Can these 2 formations be auctioned at the auction? Aunt Chin Mu smiled sweetly. Of course you can. If you have other formations, you can also sell them to Zion Pavilion. No matter whether there is an auction or not, Zion Pavilion is willing to buy them. I got it by accident. These are the only 2 sets. Is it just an accidental acquisition? There was a hint of suspicion in Aunt Chin Mu's eyes, but she didn't ask too much. Besides these 2 formations, do you have any other items to auction? Zhou Daocheng calmly took out 2 small bottles, plus this. Aunt Chin Mu took the small bottle with her delicate jade fingers and gently brushed her fingers. Zhou Daocheng dodged calmly. Aunt Chin Mu's eyes did not change. She sniffed lightly, and a hint of surprise flashed in her eyes. Spiritual liquid. Or second grade. Zhou Daocheng nodded slightly. Yes. This spiritual liquid is pure and rich. It should come from a natural spiritual spring. I wonder if you have any other spiritual liquid. Zhou Daocheng frowned slightly, and couldn't help but sigh that this woman was experienced. Just from the quality of the spiritual liquid, she noticed the source of the spiritual liquid. Still the same rhetoric, Zhou Daocheng calmly replied. It was obtained by accident, only 2 bottles. Also obtained by accident. Aunt Chin Mu couldn't help but raise her eyebrows, staring at Zhou Daocheng, as if trying to see something. Zhou Daocheng was not moved at all, and smiled and said, Miss Chin, do you have any questions? If I can't auction it, I can sell it somewhere else. Of course I can auction it. Seeing that Zhou Daocheng's tone was slightly distant, Aunt Chin Mu stopped asking questions and took out a small token and handed it to Zhou Daocheng. The items meet the auction requirements. This is the entrance token for the auction. The auction will officially start in 2 days. You can enter for free as the owner of the auction items. Welcome to your presence, Aunt Chin Mu said in a gentle voice and appropriate words. Zhou Daocheng nodded, motioned Meng Yushan to take it, and then turned and left. Looking at Zhou Daocheng's figure moving away, a middle-aged man walked out from behind Aunt Chin Mu and said in a deep voice, Aunt Mu, how are the items? Aunt Chin Mu's eyes flickered, and after a long silence she said, Second uncle, look at this formation and the spiritual fluid, what do you think? Haha, Aunt Mu is joking. You should know better about these things. Second uncle, I don't understand. Then the man asked with some confusion, what's wrong? Is there something wrong with something? Aunt Chin Mu shook her head slightly. The things are very good, but there are some issues with their origin. Oh, the middle-aged man frowned in confusion. Could it be that the other party is an evil cultivator and the things were plundered? Aunt Chin Mu stood in front of the window. The cheongsam that fit her body showed exquisite curves. She supported her chin with her fingers and shook her head to deny this statement. Probably not. What I mean is that their identities seem to be somewhat special, and they are probably not ordinary monks. How can you tell? Look at this spiritual liquid. It should be the spiritual liquid from the 2nd level spiritual spring eyes, but I know all the families in the nearby area that have 2nd level spiritual spring eyes, and these 2 people are not among them. After saying this, the middle-aged man thought thoughtfully. Indeed, there are very few families that can possess 2nd level spiritual veins, and the number of families with 2nd level spiritual spring eyes can be counted on one hand. Aunt Chin Mu nodded and said, so there are only 2 possibilities. The first is that they came from other places and are not local forces in this area. The second possibility is that they discovered a place that has never been discovered before. Lingquan I. Which one do you prefer? The second type. Aunt Chin Mu replied calmly, then took it out of the storage bag and exchanged it for the falling stone array, and then slowly said. There are also these 2 sets of formations. This person said they were obtained by accident. However, when I look at the details of the formation disc, they have not been used, and there are no historical traces. It is most likely that they were refined recently. When the middle-aged man heard this, he raised his eyebrows and said, just refined. Could it be that he is an array master? That's wrong. But the man quickly denied it. If he were an array master, wouldn't he know the difference between the old and new arrays? The details that even Aunt Mu can see, an array master should know better. Aunt Chin Mu nodded slightly. So, he should have exposed it to me on purpose. Why? Aunt Chin Mu smiled and said, selling formations shows that he lacks spiritual stones. Deliberately exposing his identity shows that he has plans to trade. This person will probably sell formation discs in the future. Be careful in the future. If this person seeks cooperation, you can contact. If Zhou Daocheng were present and heard these remarks, he would definitely be in awe. Because of this woman's analysis, his purpose has been analyzed to the fullest. He naturally knew that anyone with some experience could easily identify these formations. Are they newly refined formations? The reason for doing this is just to make his identity more elusive and to test Zion Pavilion's attitude. From now on, the sale of formations will be inevitable. If Zion Pavilion intends to win over him or is willing to cooperate, Zhou Daocheng will naturally want it. Leave Zion Pavilion. Sir, if you take out 2 valuable items in succession, we may attract the attention of Zion Pavilion. Oh, will they kill people and seize treasures? That's not true, but they may investigate us, especially my identity, which can be easily found out. Meng Yushan said with some worry. Rogue cultivators like Meng Yushan, yes, have a natural grudge against powerful forces. They are 2 opposing parties, so they are particularly sensitive in this regard. Zhou Daocheng didn't care. Just check it out. The world is full of hustle and bustle, all for the benefit of others. Meng Yushan nodded thoughtfully and said nothing more. After interacting with him every day, he knew that the young man in front of him was not a young and frivolous person, and he was quite capable. 2 days later, the Zion Pavilion auction officially begins. The auction, which was rare in several years, attracted many surrounding forces. A large number of monks gathered in Baihifang City and became extremely lively. Although top-level resources such as foundation establishment pills did not appear in this auction, there were also many precious items whose value should not be underestimated. For example, a second-level mid-level magic weapon with a plated fine iron rod, a second-level ice mysterious water diluent, and a set of second-level low-level exercises. Golden feather flower and so on. There is even news that the final auction items of this auction are a second-order low-grade iron armored puppet and half a purple monkey flower. It is precisely because of these two items that it attracts so many people because the meaning they represent is extraordinary. The second-level low-grade iron armored puppet is equivalent to a monk in the early stage of foundation building. Although its actual combat power is not as good as that of a foundation building strongman, and each time it is used, a large amount of spiritual stones are consumed. But its value cannot be underestimated. For the Qi Lian family, if they can obtain this puppet, it means they have a foundation building warrior, and the overall strength of the family is barely among the foundation building families. It is even possible to use the puppet's strength to earn enough spirit stones for the family to speed up the process of purchasing the foundation establishment pill. Even for a foundation building family, if this puppet can be obtained, it can also be used as the family's trump card, greatly increasing the family's foundation. Another item, the purple monkey flower, is of equally extraordinary value. It is one of the three main materials of the foundation establishment pill. Although the specific formula of the foundation establishment pill is owned by only a few powerful forces, the main materials for refining the three flavors of the foundation establishment pill are widely circulated in the cultivation world. They are chalcedony mushroom, tianling fruit, and purple monkey flower. The main reason why the foundation building pill is so precious is that the materials are scarce. Even powerful forces can hardly gather them together easily. As powerful as Qingshan sect was, the last time they opened the furnace to refine the foundation building pill was 15 years ago, which shows how precious the materials are. Among these three materials, the jade marrow mushroom and the heavenly spirit fruit are both second-grade upper-grade natural treasures, far from being available to everyone. Although the purple monkey flower is only a second-grade medium grade, it is also expensive and is sought after by many forces. When Zhou Daocheng learned that there would be these two items at the auction, he knew that this auction would be very fierce. However, those who competed for these two items must be powerful forces, and have nothing to do with small figures like Zhou Daocheng. It just so happened that he could take advantage of others snatching the second-grade lower-grade puppets and purple monkey flowers to try to bid for some other auction items at a lower price. Zhou Daocheng brought Meng Yushan to the Zion Pavilion auction house early. As the owner of the auction item, they got a small private room on the second floor, equipped with tea, cakes and spiritual fruits. The environment was much better than the ordinary seats below. The auction started soon. The host was a graceful woman about 30 years old. She was proficient in auctions and should have been specially trained by Zion Pavilion. Fellow Taoists, I think everyone understands the rules of the auction. Now let's invite the first auction item, a first-class magic weapon, a red gold iron knife, from the Bai family, a family of weapon refiners, and it was the last head of the Bai family. The red gold iron knife can add more than 3 layers of strength to the late-stage Qi training strongman. The starting price is 500 low-grade spirit stones. The first lot is a first-grade upper-grade magic weapon. The quality is excellent, almost close to the level of a second-grade magic weapon. Zhou Daocheng couldn't help but be moved. Magic weapons greatly increase the strength of cultivators. Whether two cultivators of the same level have a handy magic weapon has a great impact on the strength of both parties. If a cultivator has a set of matching magic weapons, talismans, pills, formations, and even puppets and beasts, then the strength can be increased by more than double. Especially for a cultivator like Zhou Daocheng with a special practice, he has extremely strong defense and sustained combat capabilities, and the demand for attacking magic weapons is particularly great. It's a pity that Zhou Daocheng has always been short of money. In addition to the formation, he can't afford other resources. Looking at the red gold iron knife in front of him, Zhou Daocheng thought carefully and still didn't buy it. After all, the Zhou family is also a family of weapon refiners. Even if they want to buy magic tools, they will definitely buy them at home, and they can also make them according to their own needs to be more suitable for themselves. While thinking, the price of the red gold fine iron knife has been increased to 1,000 low-grade spirit stones. The price of an ordinary first-grade upper-grade magic tool is about 800 to 1,200 low-grade spirit stones. After reaching this level, Zhou Daocheng is even less likely to make a move. Finally, a red gold fine iron knife was obtained by a casual cultivator who has established his foundation. Most casual cultivators do not have a stable source of income, so they have fewer spirit stones. Even if they reach the foundation building stage, many cannot afford a second-grade magic tool. The second auction item is 5 first-grade upper-grade thunder and fire talismans, with a starting price of 100 spirit stones, which is much lower than the price of magic tools. Zhou Daocheng tried to bid, but after only 5 rounds, the price was raised to 350 spirit stones, which exceeded expectations, so he gave up directly. Zhou Daocheng shook his head helplessly. All the things are good, but the price is too expensive. The third auction item is the falling rock formation. The first grade inferior should be the lowest quality auction item at this auction, but no one showed disdain, because the formation itself is very rare, even the first grade inferior is highly sought after. Many hunting teams, even if they only have a set of first grade inferior formations, will greatly increase their safety. So, the formation with a starting price of 100 spirit stones soon reached 160 inferior spirit stones, and finally the 2 sets of formations were sold for a total of 380 inferior spirit stones, which was beyond Zhou Daocheng's expectation. If it is sold to Zion Pavilion, the price will probably not be that high. After the first income, Zhou Daocheng's confidence increased a lot, and if he needs to buy the auction items later, he can also bid with confidence. But he didn't notice that in a private room somewhere, an old man in a brocade robe, with several middle-aged men standing behind him, immediately turned ugly when they saw the formation in the auction item, and snorted coldly. HMPH, I didn't expect that in Baihifeng Market, in addition to our Huang family, there would be other formations flowing in. The middle-aged man behind him thought for a moment, bowed slightly, and analyzed respectfully. Fourth uncle, other formation families should know the rules and it is impossible for them to sell formations to Baihifeng Market. They should be some small forces that don't know the rules, and they are just first-level low-grade formations, which are not to be feared. Zhang Yin, this matter is not big or small, but the formation is the foundation of my Huang family after all. Remember not to be careless. Strengthen the monitoring of the market transactions in the future. If someone sells formations, remember to notify me. Yes. Fourth elder. The next few auction items are also first-level medium quality to high-quality magic tools, elixirs, talismans, natural materials and treasures, etc., with prices ranging from 300 to 1,000. The 13th auction item, Zhou Daocheng's second auction item, 2 bottles of Lingquan liquid, appeared. In theory, as a second-level material, the value of Lingquan liquid is at least more than 1,000 lingxi, or even higher. But because the quantity was too small, the price was severely suppressed. Finally, it was purchased by a foundation-building family proficient in alchemy at a price of 600 low-grade spirit stones per bottle, a total of 1,200 low-grade spirit stones. Zhou Daocheng's face was excited. The auction did not disappoint him. This was the largest amount of spirit stone income he had ever obtained, a full 1,580 low-grade spirit stones. Of course, most of it came from the spirit spring liquid, which was not a sustainable income. If the spirit spring liquid was sold in large quantities, it would likely cause the spirit spring eye to dry up, which was really not worth the loss. If it was not for a last resort, Zhou Daocheng would not have been able to fish in a dry pond and overuse the spirit liquid in the spirit spring eye. If he wanted to obtain spirit stones in the future, he must find other ways. Now is the 18th lot. 6 first-grade green-bearded shrimp seedlings, 2 males and 4 females, starting price 100 low-grade spirit stones. After the words fell, Zhou Daocheng's eyes lit up. Green-bearded shrimp. Meng Yushan, do you know this kind of shrimp? Zhou Daocheng had never heard of green-bearded shrimp, but since the seedlings were auctioned at the auction, it meant that there was a high probability that they could be bred and cultivated, which made him very excited. Meng Yushan thought for a moment and said, Sir, this is a carnivorous shrimp, with plump meat, rich in spiritual energy, and relatively docile personality, suitable for family forces to cultivate, and can be raised in the spiritual spring pool in our valley. It's true. Zhou Daocheng nodded slightly. Most of the monsters in the world of cultivation are extremely fierce and extremely difficult to tame, but there are also a small number of docile personalities that can be used as meat. 500 low-grade spirit stones. Zhou Daocheng raised the price by 100, but was soon drowned out by other voices. 550 low-grade spiritual stones. I'll pay 600. It's just 6 green-bearded spiritual shrimp seedlings. Whether they can be fed or not is a question. That's all. I will give you 100 more spiritual stones and 700 low-grade spiritual stones. Someone sneered, quite disdainful of this clumsy method, and directly increased the price to 750 low-grade spiritual stones. If the 6 green-bearded shrimp seedlings can be successfully bred, they will represent a complete production chain. From now on, green-bearded shrimps will be continuously provided every year, and the spiritual stone benefits they bring will be far beyond what can be compared with hundreds of spiritual stones. Under normal circumstances, the net income of a first-grade high-grade spiritual shrimp in a year will never be less than 2,000, or even more. This is a huge temptation for most chi refining and foundation building families. However, what the person said before was right. If the breeding fails and all the shrimp larvae die, the money will be wasted. Therefore, when the price is close to 800 low-grade spiritual stones, the voices of quotations are much less. Zhou Daocheng had thoughts in his eyes. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to give it a try. Since he had a spiritual spring eye, the water source was of high quality, and the success rate was still very high. 1,000 spirit stones. When the price was reported, the entire venue was quiet for a few seconds. After it reached 4 figures, the price-performance ratio of green-bearded shrimp seedlings was much higher, and many families were unwilling to take risks. As the transaction was successful, Zhou Daocheng breathed a long sigh of relief and finally managed to capture the 6 shrimp fry without any danger. Not long after, the waiter from Zion Pavilion came to the private room with a sealed glass box containing 6 small shrimp fry. Quote. The maid respectfully said, "Senior, this is the item you bid for. The spiritual stones consumed will be deducted from the income from the sale of the auction item." Quote. Zhou Daocheng took it over. The shrimp seedlings were very small and swam in the diluted spiritual liquid. They had plenty of vitality and seemed to have a high chance of survival. After confirming that everything was correct, he placed the box on the table beside him. Living things could not be put into storage bags, so he needed to be extra careful during transportation. After purchasing the green-bearded spiritual shrimp, he was no longer eligible for other auction items. The prices of most of the auction items were far beyond his ability to afford. He could only sigh in despair and secretly thought that he had to work hard to earn spiritual stones. When the auction was coming to an end and was about to enter the final auction stage, Zhou Daocheng went to the backstage in advance, took away his own spiritual stones, and then left the auction site. The competition between the second-level iron-armored puppet and the purple monkey flower was not something he could participate in at all, including the disputes that might occur after the auction, which were even more dangerous. Therefore, Zhou Daocheng chose to leave early and took the remaining 580 low-grade spiritual stones to buy some items needed for life and cultivation. In terms of life, in order to prepare for the expansion of power in advance, a batch of daily necessities needed to be purchased, such as clothes, luminous stones, communication stones, pots and pans, etc., are all common items, and the price is not expensive, only costing 50 low-grade spirit stones. In addition, cultivation items are relatively expensive. I spent more than 300 spirit stones to buy some first-level medium-grade healing pills and Fuyuan pills, which can restore spiritual energy and heal injuries. They are the most commonly used pills for chi refining cultivators. Before the auction ended, Zhou Daocheng took Meng Yushin and the other 2 and set off on the return journey. Compared to when I first came, I now have a lot more resources. After returning to the valley, I planted both the farming and breeding industries can develop. Yellow thorn vines and green-bearded shrimps are very good resources. The 7th day of the return journey. About halfway through the journey, we have already left Baihifang City and entered the uninhabited wilderness. The number of monsters has increased dramatically. Holding a machete, Meng Yushin has killed a first-level medium-quality black wolf monster. He skillfully collected wolf teeth, peeled off the complete wolf skin, and covered the bloody smell. Just then, the sound of swords colliding came from the deep jungle in the distance. The 4 of them were alert at the same time. They ignored the corpse of the monster and looked vigilantly at the place where the sound came from. At the same time, they quickly bent down to avoid being exposed. The current location is already an area occupied by monsters. If there are cultivators, there are only 2 possibilities, either a team of family and sect forces, or a hunting team composed of scattered cultivators. Either way, it may bring great danger. My lord, there should be a dispute among the cultivators. Meng Yushin whispered. Zhou Daocheng frowned. He left the market early just to avoid disputes. He didn't expect to run into trouble halfway. Can we take a detour? Meng Yushin thought about it and drew a rough map on the ground based on the surrounding terrain. It's a bit troublesome. The mountain terrain here is complicated. If you take a detour, you need to walk more than half a month. More than half a month. Zhou Daocheng's face was a little ugly. After weighing it for a long time, he said in a deep voice, it's too far. The green-bearded shrimp can't stand it for so long. Let's go and see what happened in front first. If it doesn't work, take a detour. Considering the time factor, Zhou Daocheng decided to check the situation first. He restrained his breath and approached the front carefully. The sound of fighting became more and more obvious, and the roars of both sides came into his ears. When he heard the sound, Meng Yushin's face suddenly changed, and he said in surprise, is it Lin Yuan? Zhou Daocheng was stunned, remembered something, and asked, the casual cultivator I met in Baihei Market. Quote. Meng Yushin nodded silently, his expression became a little serious. Lin Yuan and he were at the same realm and their strengths were comparable. If the enemy was difficult for both parties to deal with, then he must be very powerful. Sir, things may be troublesome. Should we participate? Meng Yushin lowered his voice. Zhou Daocheng looked at him in surprise. Isn't he your old friend? Don't you want to help him? Meng Yushin was also stunned and scratched his head. That being said, if you want to put yourself in danger, it's really unnecessary. Before he finished speaking, Huang Zhou on the side added concisely, Sir, that person has a grudge against Brother Meng, and the two of them even robbed a woman. Quote. This sentence silenced the four people present. Zhou Daocheng looked at Meng Yushin in surprise with a strange expression. Meng Yushin's expression froze, and his face turned visibly dark. He kicked Huang Zhou in anger. Don't bullshit me. I have forgotten about this matter a long time ago. Do you really think that I, Meng, will do this for a mere woman? That's not an ordinary woman. Sister Lan is the sexy Sister Lan with a bust of 2.5 feet and wearing black silk cloud pattern gauze stockings. Wow, everyone exclaimed. Bullshit. Meng Yushin showed an angry expression and said word by word. It's obviously 3 feet, and it's not just black silk cloud pattern gauze stockings, but also pleated rabbit ear skirt, tianxiong tight leather pants, dark flower lustful purple cloud clothes, cloud rain dragon phoenix snow gauze robe. Woo 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 my Lan. Zhou Daocheng's face turned black. What the hell is this? Has it developed too advanced? Seeing Meng Yushin being hit in the sore spot and about to shed tears, Zhou Daocheng hurriedly stopped him. Don't worry, old Meng, you come back today and you will eventually take back everything you have. Sir, don't comfort me, I have forgotten. But that's 2.5 feet. 3 feet. Zhou Daocheng. Through the dense jungle, Zhou Daocheng looked at the battle area, where there were dozens of people fighting, and several people were already lying on the ground with casualties. One of the parties was Meng Yushin's old acquaintance Lin Yuan. A total of 5 people participated in the battle. 1 was at the 8th level of Qi training, 2 were at the 7th level, and 2 were at the 6th level. They were currently at an absolute disadvantage and could only barely resist. There were 8 enemies, all wearing black robes, with fierce faces and ruthless attacks. They were not ordinary cultivators at first glance. And their strength was obviously stronger. The leader was also at the 8th level of Qi training, and there were 4 more at the 7th level of Qi training, and 3 at the 6th level of Qi training, occupying an absolute chance of winning. Meng Yushin analyzed in a low voice. Sir, the other party should be a group of evil cultivators, and their strength is not weak. Evil cultivators. Zhou Daocheng understood that among the large group of casual cultivators, most casual cultivators make a living by hunting monsters, but there are also a small number of evil cultivators who kill people and rob treasures. Most of these evil cultivators are in remote areas and rarely appear around the righteous forces. I didn't expect that it was actually a group of evil cultivators. Sir, are you going to take action? If we join, the chances of winning are not small. Meng Yushin said in a deep voice. Once Meng Yushin joined the battlefield, the number of Qi training level 8 would form a 1-to-2 situation, and Zhou Daocheng would block other cultivators, and the chances of winning would definitely not be low. Zhou Daocheng looked at the battle situation with sharp eyes, analyzing the pros and cons of this action. His side was not strong, and any accident might lead to eternal damnation. After thinking for a long time, Zhou Daocheng still chose to take action. Judging from the distribution of strength, once he and Meng Yushin joined the battlefield, the chances of winning were still very high. Moreover, he had the idea of expanding his power before, and this was a very good opportunity. Old Meng, listen to my command. Seeing that Zhou Daocheng was going to take action, Meng Yushen's eyes became cautious, and his voice was lowered a few points. He whispered, "Sir, what should we do?" Zhou Daocheng said in a deep voice, "If we rashly join the battle, even if we can win in the end, we will inevitably suffer heavy losses, so we must find a suitable opportunity to try to use a sneak attack to seriously injure the evil cultivator of the 8th level of Qi training." In the entire battle, the 8th level Qi training strongman played a decisive factor. Once the leader of the opponent was seriously injured or even killed, more than half of the victory would be won. As for other cultivators at the 7th and 6th levels of Qi training, Zhou Daocheng alone could easily deal with them, and there was nothing to fear. Old Meng, you will go around to the back of the battle and hide, I will attract attention from the front, and you will take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Zhou Daocheng arranged. Sir, if he attacks you, can you withstand it with your strength? Zhou Daocheng glanced at him. When you fought with me, did I withstand it? Meng Yushen was stunned, and then he realized that he was worrying too much. Although his master's attack ability is not strong, his earth attribute aura is extremely heavy, like a tortoise shell. Not only is the defense extremely strong, but the magic power is also strong and extremely resistant to beating. Even a strong man of a higher realm will find it difficult to break the defense in a short time. After making such arrangements, Meng Yushen did not hesitate to bypass the battle area alone and find a hidden area to hide. However, the terrain here is complicated and it is impossible to completely bypass the battle area, so he can only find a tricky position near the right area. After looking at each other and confirming that they were right, Zhou Daocheng officially launched his plan. The strong mana in his body surged, and the earthy yellow spiritual energy attached to the surface of his body, forming a set of armor-like protection. However, it was difficult to condense this layer of mana into substance with only the cultivation of the Qi refining stage. The defensive effect was not as strong as expected, and it could only be considered barely enough. Always paying attention to the movements on the battlefield, when the Qi refining level 8 evil cultivator turned his back to Meng Yushen, Zhou Daocheng immediately seized the opportunity, thought for only 1 second, and rushed directly into the battle. In an instant, the sudden movement immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. When Lin Yuan saw the person coming, he couldn't help but feel happy, and hurriedly shouted, "This fellow Taoist, this person is an evil cultivator, please help me." The 8 evil cultivators were also stunned. They were caught off guard. After a little panic, their hands and feet were a little confused for a while. However, the leading man at the 8th level of Qi refining reacted the fastest, shouting angrily, "He is only at the 7th level of Qi refining, kill him." However, just when he shouted, it was also the time when he was most relaxed. At the most critical moment, Meng Yushen, who was hiding in the back, suddenly jumped out, and the magic weapon in his hand fiercely stabbed out, and the violent spiritual energy rushed straight to the back of the evil cultivator like a flood. The crisis of life and death surged into his heart, like a thorn in his back, so that this person immediately reacted, his pupils contracted, and tried to fight back. But Lin Yuan, who was in the battlefield, how could he give up such a good opportunity? Not seeking to cause too much damage, it is still very easy to simply lock this evil cultivator. With the tacit cooperation of both parties, Meng Yushen's sword gained a lot, piercing directly through the back, and the splashing blood fell in the air, rising up curls of hot air. At the most critical moment, the evil cultivator burst out all his strength and tilted his body slightly to the right, which allowed his heart to avoid the sword. In the end, only one arm was disabled. Zhou Daocheng was secretly disappointed. With such a good opportunity, he didn't kill him with one blow, leaving the other party a ray of life. "Don't let them leave, kill them." Zhou Daocheng's voice was cold, and he slapped a 6th level Qi refining cultivator with one palm. The heavy energy directly collapsed his chest. Meng Yushen also reacted immediately. If this group of evil cultivators were allowed to leave, there would be constant troubles and no peace in the future. Thinking of the dangers that might be encountered in the future, he dared not be careless. The offensive was different from the tidal wave, and he chopped at the evil cultivator man continuously. At the same time, Huang Zhou and Zhang Yin also joined the battlefield, cooperating with Lin Yuan's men to start a chaotic battle, filling the disadvantages of the 7th and 6th levels of Qi refining, and further tilting the balance of the battle. Seeing such a scene, the evil cultivator of the 8th level of Qi training had a sinister look in his eyes and had the idea of retreating. He was already seriously injured. If he continued to fight, the end would be imaginable. However, the battle had reached this point, so how could he stop and leave whenever he wanted? Zhou Daocheng's mind was as clear as a mirror. After using thundering means to deal with 2 Qi training level 7 and 1 Qi training level 6, Zhou Daocheng left the remaining few to others, and took the initiative to join the battlefield of the 8th level of Qi training. His goal was very clear, not to cause any attack, but to contain and trap the enemy, further reducing the chance of this person escaping. The evil cultivator's breath became more and more weak. Because of the continuous fighting and consumption, the ammunition for replenishing mana had been used up, and the injury on his arm was also getting worse. Now he was at the end of his strength. The other evil cultivators at the 6th and 7th levels of Qi refining were also in a panic. Seeing that their boss was unable to change the situation, they all looked for ways to escape. However, due to an oversight, Zhou Daocheng secretly said, "Not good." 2 evil cultivators at the 7th level of Qi refining risked serious injuries by shouldering a sword and then forcibly leaving the battlefield. Seeing this scene, the evil cultivator at the 8th level of Qi refining seemed to see hope and shouted loudly, "Ha ha ha, 2nd and 4th. Come and give me a helping hand. As long as you can escape, this place today will be recovered sooner or later." Quote. While shouting, he also moved closer to the 2 men, trying to get rid of the siege of Zhou Daocheng and the others. It was too late, but it was too soon. In the midst of lightning and flint, one of the 7th level Qi refining monks had a sinister look in his eyes. When his boss was about to approach, he slapped his palm fiercely. "You bastard, what are you doing?" In everyone's surprised eyes, the evil cultivator at the 8th level of Qi refining was struck out with a palm, a mouthful of blood spurted out, and he fell to the ground. Meng Yushin and others were startled, and during this gap, the 2 evil cultivators at the 7th level of Qi refining fled quickly, and their figures rushed into the jungle, disappearing completely in one breath. Zhou Daocheng reacted later and found that the evil cultivator on the ground was not unconscious, so he kicked him without hesitation, just a few kicks in the head, but he saw that he only vomited blood and was not unconscious. Meng Yushin was startled and said, "That adult. You will kick him to death if you do this." "What should we do?" "You have to kick the acupuncture points." The experienced Meng Yushin kicked him in the back of the head. The evil leader rolled his eyes and fainted. Zhou Daocheng looked at this scene and touched his chin thoughtfully. Then he inadvertently looked at Lin Yuan aside and suddenly asked, "Which acupoint is it specifically? I have to learn it carefully. If someone escapes accidentally, it will be a big sin." Meng Yushin was not stingy and explained, "Sir, these are actually the blood vessels on both sides of the neck. You can see it is at this location. Because it bleeds a lot, hitting it hard will make people faint. But this is only suitable for useful during Qi training period." "I see, is this here?" Bang! Before Lin Yuan could react, he was slapped directly on the neck. Although the position was a little off, he was still forcibly knocked unconscious. "What are you?" The 2 boys next to him were startled and glared angrily. Before they could say anything, they heard 2 muffled sounds in succession. The 2 of them received 2 sap blows, rolled their eyes and fainted. Phew, everything goes well. Zhou Daocheng clapped his hands relaxedly and ordered Huang Zhou and Zhang Yin to tie up the 4 people. The harvest this time was good, and a total of 4 people were captured, namely Lin Yuan, his 2 7th level Qi training monks, and the evil cultivator at the 8th level Qi training. 2 at the 8th level of Qi refining and 2 at the 7th level of Qi refining. If they can conquer them all, their strength will definitely increase significantly. However, 2 evil cultivators from the 7th level of Qi refining also escaped. As for the others, they all died in the battle, which was considered a considerable loss. During the binding process, a body search was conducted to remove all useful things from their bodies. Lin Yuan and the leader of the evil cultivator each found a storage bag. Adding the 2 in Zhou Daocheng's hands, they now have 4 storage bags and are very wealthy. In Lin Yuan's storage bag, there are more than 300 low-grade spirit stones, a set of first-order high-grade skills, 100 waves Ju, dozens of bottles of used elixirs, a large number of monster materials and spiritual plants, with a value of about 200 spirit stones. In addition, Lin Yuan also had 2 magical weapons, the first-order high-grade blast gun and the first-order mid-grade green edge armor. Zhou Daocheng accepted them without hesitation. The evil cultivator leader's assets are more abundant, with more than 600 low-grade spiritual stones and a wide variety of materials, which should have been snatched from different cultivators. A simple calculation shows that they are worth more than 500 spiritual stones. Some of them can be used as formation materials or for practice. Zhou Daocheng collected them all, and the rest can be sold. In addition, many magical weapons, exercises, and spells were also found. There were a lot of them, but the quality varied, and not many of them were usable. Among them, Zhou Daocheng found a green rainbow shield and a bone-cutting knife, both of which were of first-class quality. They should be the magic tools used by evil cultivators themselves, and the quality was very good. In terms of exercises, the highest quality was only the first level, and they were not upright exercises. Most of them were crooked methods. Zhou Daocheng only glanced at them briefly and threw them aside. The spells are also unremarkable. Most of them are common spells in the world of immortality, such as fireball, water flow, speed, etc. Zhou Daocheng has learned them in his family. As for the two 7th level Qi refining monks, they had no storage bags and only carried 1 or 2 magic weapons with them. The quality was relatively poor and they only had dozens of spiritual stones. Zhou Daocheng accepted them all. The harvest is pretty good. Zhou Daocheng clicked the storage bag in his hand with satisfaction, glanced at the darkening sky, and called, "Lao Meng, find a cave nearby, we will be repairing it tonight." Quote. Okay. Meng Yushin was already familiar with it and started to handle it skillfully. Zhou Daocheng's experience in surviving in the wild has improved a lot. He knew that it was almost night and it would be more dangerous to travel in the dark. Moreover, he was carrying 4 tow bottles, so it would definitely be unsafe on the road, so he decided to rest first. It just so happened that I could directly conquer the 4 of them using mystical magic, thus saving them a long night and many dreams. The thick night was extremely silent, and occasionally the suppressed roars of wild beasts could be heard. In front of a hidden cave, a bonfire burned cracklingly. Surrender or die. Choose one. Zhou Daocheng was roasting meat by himself. The voice asked calmly. I surrender. The pale-faced leader of the evil cultivators had already had his black robe stripped off. He stared with a pair of dead fish eyes. After considering for a moment, he did not resist too much. Surrender. Surrender. The 2 monks at the 7th level of Qi refining also buried their heads and gave their own answers. However, at the end, there was an alternative voice mixed in. I don't accept it. The 2 monks at the 7th level of Qi refining turned their heads and looked at Lin Yuan with sad faces, saying, "Boss, please stop being so stubborn. It's better to live than die. HMPH. Even if I, Lin Yuan, were to be chopped into pieces and fed to dogs, I would not surrender to the same person with such a treacherous person." Lin Yuan's eyes were filled with anger, and he looked at Meng Yushin with cold eyes, obviously extremely angry at his brother's backstabbing. Zhou Daocheng raised his eyebrows, and then nuzzled his lips towards Meng Yushin, signaling him to think of a solution. After all, he is a monk at the 8th level of Qi refining. He is a powerful player in the family. He is a rare human resource who can garrison a place. Meng Yushin was also very reliable and gave a reassured look. Then he stepped forward and walked in front of Lin Yuan. He heard a crack sound and the bright silver sword was unsheathed, which shocked everyone present. The air was still for 2 seconds, and Lin Yuan said coldly, "Just chop me, if I snort, I'm not a man." Meng Yushin glanced at him indifferently, and said in a voice without any emotion, "After all, we were brothers. Even if you don't want to surrender, I will persuade you not to kill you." Just when Zhou Daocheng thought that this would be a touching confession of brotherhood, Meng Yushin moved his wrist and pointed the blade between Lin Yuan's legs, just a few inches away from the sensitive part. This action scared Lin Yuan. Meng Yushin changed the subject and a hideous smile appeared on his face. "But I heard that you like women and have harmed many girls. Today I will castrate you with great mercy, dry your treasures, and sell them to the grocery store as spiritual objects of heaven and earth." Fuck. Everyone present couldn't help but feel cold in their legs, feeling a chill. Besides, I heard that Xiaolan likes fine wine. I will buy this pair of treasures back and make fine wine to share with Alan. You can come and join us, and we will have a good time. However, you should only be sisters with Alan this time. Everyone took a breath and looked at Meng Yushin with a trace of fear. Even Zhou Daocheng couldn't help but look at him with admiration. Lin Yuan's face flushed red. He opened his mouth repeatedly to say something, but when he saw the long knife between his legs, he didn't utter a word. After holding it in for dozens of seconds, he finally lost his temper and said weakly, "Old Meng, I suddenly. This lord in front of me is handsome and powerful. It is my blessing in my previous life to submit to him. Blessing in my previous life to submit to him. Blessing in my